All set. Okay. We're recording when and
I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is 5:07. I don't know.
That's perfect.
Perfect.
roll call.
Roll call.
Chair Standish,
Here.
Vice Chair Davis,
Here.
Committee Member Boren,
Here.
Committee Member Heislip,
Yes, ma'am.
and Committee Member Ryan.
Here.
Okay, before we proceed with the regular agenda, did you want to say something, Mark?
Well, yeah, I think there is going to, just a couple of things I wanted to review. I think there's going to be an reordering of the agenda a little bit, Madam Chair. First of all, our town attorney, Mike Cirillo, is here, and we would like to cover in order, of course, the Attorney General opinion, and then if there is time, under B, old business, we'd like to do the one-way communication and related matters. If Mike does have a conflict, he has another city meeting to go to, and so he's got an hour. So if we can do those, right
So
up
how
front,
would you
that
like
would be.
to renumber this then?
So just as a note, that would be, we would follow the agenda, we would do new business, A1,
A1 is new business.
and then we would move to B2. And then we could continue in the same rest of the format. Just a note for everybody, I know it's a very long and ambitious agenda, and I would caution everybody that don't feel bad if we get through half of it, that's good tonight. Just as I'm trying to lay that out, so I don't want you to think that we have to be here or fall asleep in cots or anything. I just want to also quickly go over what we had talked about at the last meeting and how we're going to do things. And as you see, we have indicated up there, public comment will be taken after each agenda item. I think it's within your discretion if you want to do it during the item. And let me just say that we talked about the fact that what we would like to do is, as we go through each item, we have the staff review the item for you in detail. And then we would have deliberation, or the option is to then get public comment and then do deliberation. But as we discussed, we're not looking to do both at the same time, mix them together like, which is ordinarily custom in this town because of the fact that we need to get through a lot of data and we need to have a lot of input and we don't want to.
Does anyone have any objection to that? So we'll proceed with Mr. Fleischman presenting
Or myself and then go to.
details,
Right.
and then
And then we can have our
public.
deliberation.
Okay.
Then
Then
public,
public comment.
and then, of course, you can take your final action. The last thing I wanted to mention, everybody, is just remember that it's not incumbent upon this board to rewrite everything and to have to do everything. What you're doing is you're assessing all the relevant codes that we're going over, and you're making a determination and recommendation to council, one, either it's okay as it is, two, it needs to be deleted in its entirety, three, it needs to be amended, and you can have a recommendation as to the amendment. But if we're sitting here trying to wordsmith and come up with the language, that's not what we're about, and we would never get this thing done within the one-year time frame that we currently have by the council. So just as a caution, how we're proceeding in this matter.
Well, isn't that for us to throw it to P&Z, and that would be there between them and town council to do?
Well, I think it's up to me to bring it back to town council and have town council decide either who's going to draft, how we're going to do it, and then go through the process.
Howard?
I 100% concur. We can't sit here and wordsmith and we'll never get out of here. But might I suggest that our function is not saying, this has a problem, throw it to the town council or somebody else to rewrite, and then it comes back and we're still not happy with it. What I suggest is we do our wordsmithing at home in our time and come to the following meeting with what our best suggestions are in relation to a specific problem that we've identified.
Absolutely, that's what I think I said.
I'm sorry.
I don't mean.
Okay, should we proceed? Okay. Can we move to approval of the agenda? Or no? Yes.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Anyone second?
I hear.
Okay.
Yes.
Approval of the agenda?
Okay.
Okay, we'll proceed.
Also, we sent you minutes, and I don't know if you prepared tonight, if everybody had a chance to look at them.
I did not get the
Okay,
email, so
then
can we
we'll
just
wait till
keep the
next week.
minute, yeah, the minutes to, it was,
Okay,
we'll do the
fine.
minutes to the next meeting. Okay, so then we are on 2A, new business attorney general opinion.
Yes, and I'm going to turn this one to Mr. Searle.
Thank you. My name is, for those of you, I think I know most of you, but Mike Cirillo, I'm the town attorney. You've been provided a copy of the Attorney General opinion that was sent to the town on January 29th, or dated January 29th. I don't have a real formal presentation for you. I thought maybe best just to go through it and then answer whatever questions you may have, because I view this more of a code enforcement type issue than a how you write your ULDC, since this basically says that if it's a non-residential farm building, farm fence, or farm sign, it's exempt from what you're working on, which is ULDCs. And so, just a little background, I assume you all read the opinion. In a nutshell, the statute now says that non-residential farm buildings, farm fences, and farm signs are exempt from all municipal and county codes. And before it had limited it to exempt from building codes and fees, now it's all codes and fees. And the Attorney General confirmed that was the intent, and that gives us some real good direction on how to deal with code enforcement when it's identified that whatever structure we're working with is a farm building or a farm fence, and that goes through the analysis of what is a farm, and a farm is basically farming products, and it snowballs. You're very familiar with that, I assume. So what this opinion really doesn't provide, in my view, but you can disagree with me, guidance on how to write a ULDC, because it exempts these items from the ULDC. So how this will play out, and how it is playing out, is that if there is a complaint or a case or whatever involving a building or a fence or a sign, the determination has to be made by, if it can be made by the town, of whether it's a farm building, it's a farm sign, or it's a farm fence. And if that's the case, the statute's pretty clear, we don't go any further.
I have a question.
Okay?
Where would this Attorney General opinion, should it be placed in the front of the ULDCs? I mean, I realize it's not part of, how do you,
I don't think
Place
it's
it off.
part of the
okay,
ULDCs,
so it's not
honestly.
part of, it's just basically a preamble
It's like-
before you get to the ULDCs?
Well, to me, it's another resource to be familiar with the context of what you all are doing, because, see, what you don't have in your ULDCs is you don't have, and it was referenced in the correspondence, you're not putting a copy of the Constitution in there, but it still applies to what you're doing. You're not putting the statutes in there, it still applies to what you're doing. You're not putting all the case law out there that talks about what a land development regulation is and how it has to be consistent with it. That all has to support what you're doing. So, I know this is a very important issue to the town, so I'm not belittling by saying you shouldn't incorporate it. But the fact is, whether you write the exemption or not, or the town writes the exemption or not, by state law they're exempt. So, again, as it relates to ULDCs, the fact that this is out there, I don't know how that would function with what you're doing.
Howard, you have a question?
Yes, you made the statement in several ways that the town will determine if, okay? And from my understanding, it's not within the town's purview to determine whether something is a farm or not, but it's the Palm Beach County Tax Appraiser's Office. And so is what you said really in relation to, if there is a question, then all the person has to do is show that they are running a farm according to the Palm Beach County tax appraiser's office and have agricultural standing and therefore qualify under the verbiage in the Florida Constitution as a farm? Or are you saying that the town itself is going to make its own unilateral determination as to whether they decide something is a farm or not?
Well, I mean, with all due respect, that is not a ULDC question. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and debate you or members of the public or the board on a code enforcement issue and how the town addresses a code enforcement issue. How it relates to drafting ULDC is, I think, is the relevant point on this AGO. I was trying to paraphrase what I understood the role of this AGO to be.
Well, the verbiage that would be suggested is when we write the ULDC, okay, because someplace else I'm going to be going with this. Because a lot of these activities, it has been determined that you do not get agricultural protection and protection under the Right to Farm Act unless you get agricultural standing with the Palm Beach County Tax Appraiser's Office. Now, having said that, there are a lot of people that do agricultural type activities that don't necessarily go and do that. And from what I've been told, they do not fall under the protection of the Right to Farm Act. Therefore, when we make recommendations for the ULDC, we have to specifically say what to exempt. And there's a major difference in saying the town will decide what to exempt, or they will be considered agriculture if they fall under this paragraph of the Florida Constitution. And those that have chosen not to, okay, are not considered a farm, even though they have a couple of pet cows, and they might need to be under certain regulations and setbacks.
But this opinion had nothing to do with the Right to Farm Act. This opinion had only to do with structures, okay? Farm fences, farm buildings, and farm signs. And ironically, this provides those structures, I think, with more preemption, more exemptions than what you're doing than the Right to Farm Act. Because this doesn't require best management practices to be adopted in order to establish that it's a farm building. Okay, so this is...
Nor does the Right to Farm Act.
Sure it does.
No, it just requires that you not make laws that are more restrictive than the BMPs.
It's a prohibition on duplication of regulations.
Exactly.
You got to show me the first set of regulations in order to duplicate. Okay? So, and those first set of regulations have to be adopted by formal rulemaking of the state. And that's in the Right to Farm Act, and that's in Section 193. And we're getting off course on this AGO.
Right.
But the statute says we are prohibited from duplicating regulations. And those regulations have to be best management practices adopted by rulemaking.
Okay.
So, we're getting off skew from what the AGO is, but anyway.
Beck had a quick question first, John, and then John.
I was just going to ask, as we're going through these ULDC rules or whatever, would there be a clause at the end of whatever, if it fits within the 604.50, would there be like a little stipulation to say, unless it fits within this? And if we do that, how do we specify that this property is considered agriculture? Like, how would you define that property? Who would define that so that it does fit within the 604.50?
Well, here's the thing.
Who would define it?
Whether you write it in your code or not, whether you write that sentence or not, it's exempt. Okay? So when you do write a code section, so you can provide in there that, you know, and I think in the current ULDCs there are subject to the Right to Farm Act, subject to this, subject that. You know, you can write subject to 604.50 as maybe amended from time to time or whatever. So it's a useful tool, so someone knows when they look at this, okay, to go and look at it. You know, there's no problem with writing that. It's just that there's no, if you don't do it, it doesn't mean it's not exempt.
Okay, but who's going to define if that property is agricultural?
Well,
Tax collector's office.
wait.
That's my question to you.
Right.
For purposes of this,
Yes, sir.
okay, it has to be a farm building. Okay, it has to be building used for farming. In the opinion, it talks about what a farm is. what a farm sign is, and you would go through that statutory analysis to look at that. And this statute says a farm is the same meaning as a right to farm act. So you always come back to what the definition of farm, and the farm is farming activities, animals and plants beneficial to humans, and then you go from there.
But who would define the property as being a farm or agriculture? I mean, it could just be residential. I mean, you could have this residential dwelling on 5 acres, and then they decide to put up a pole barn to park their lawn tractor, and they say, well, it's a tractor, that's agricultural. It's like, well,
this statute has an objective measure that's classified agriculture. Okay, that's one. But that doesn't have to be classified as agriculture. The building could be used for farm purposes, doesn't have to be agriculture to give the benefit of this statute.
so it's vague.
Well, yeah, it is vague, but not, I think it's clear.
It
I think-
covers both ends of it.
Yeah, I think when a determination is made, and Howard, your question, I didn't mean to be argumentative, but you said the town determines, we get a complaint. Someone's gonna tell us there's a structure right on the property line. The only way we can know whether it's exempt or not is to make that determination, to look at it, to see, maybe we talk to the property owner, and he opens it up, and it's agricultural products of some sort. And it's instantly available to us, the information to know that it falls under 604. Maybe we go out there and it's used for, I don't know, storage of junk vehicles. Well, that's not a farm building, So, that's what I meant when the town determines.
But I was just trying to avoid,
Okay, yes.
Hold on.
Howard, John's next, and I believe you're only here with us for 1 hour, right? And we've used,
Give or take.
okay, so
I mean,
we've
I'll
got-
drive fast and take
Okay.
chances to get to my next meeting if I have to.
I think Howard is referring to statutes and then a combination of court cases and whatever else. The Florida statutes deal with farming under many other areas of Florida law and statutes other than the Right to Farm Act. Now, I've prepared just something that I'll hand out to you guys and to Mike and Susan, just to say that I think that what Mike's talking about and what I think we ought to be doing is just making a general statement that whatever the town's ULDC is subject to Florida statutes with whatever limitations they have in them. And then, we are not able to make determinations other than consistent with Florida statutes and Florida law as it comes out. So it's not up to us to try and create a whole new community with laws relating to agriculture. So I think that the Florida statutes and the rules and regulations and the court cases that would be precedents that we would have to acknowledge, all that is out there. All we need to do is say, hey, we recognize these items with regard to agriculture and the Florida Right to Farm Act, and the chips are going to fall where they may. And I think it's that simple.
One thing I would just say to the committee, because Mike and myself and the staff have talked about this on a number of levels. And as you all know, there's probably a good dozen to 20 statutes that in some way, shape, or form deal with agriculture in Florida statutes. We recognize how important agriculture is to the town of Waxahachie Groves. One of the things that we will be doing, and I'll be announcing this to council at their March 5th meeting, is we are going to take our time and we're going to put together I don't want to call it a white paper, but I call it more or less an approach as to how we see agriculture and how the town is going to attempt to regulate it appropriately based upon weighing all these statutes and everything that we need to look at together. So that's something that's almost independent of the ULDC, because we also did for purposes of code enforcement and guiding us in a number of areas. So that's something that we will be working on, and we're not going to rush that. It takes us a couple of months to get it out. We're going to do that, and we're going to look at it, show it to people, and get input. But it's something that we think we need to have so that everybody in the town now and into the future is, if you will, reading from the same sheet of music and trying to be consistent in approach. I'm sorry, Mike, I jumped in, you were ready
No,
to
that's
say.
okay. No, I don't remember what I was gonna say.
I was just going on, just feeding off of what you're saying, and this is new information that we discussed prior, now it's kind of come to light and you're here to discuss it more. Is it something that, I'm sorry, I have not gone through that video.
You don't have it memorized?
And I've been really, really busy because it's just that time of year for me. So apparently these guys over here are more prepared than me. How many of these things are we gonna go over that deal with this ag stuff that we can maybe either put on the back burner or throw on the front, but kind of bunch it all together and say, okay, yes, no, because apparently it's pretty black and white. And there's no point in sitting here discussing this for 3 hours, one topic, and go, hey guys, there's this law right here that says there's no point in talking about it. Is there a way to kind of, do you guys agree to streamline it? Because if this law says this and the right to farm, is it active law?
Right to farm.
Okay. The Right to Farm Act and the 604.5 says it's legal. Is that something that we can either, again, at the beginning or at the end, maybe after you present it to the town council or whatever, and just, I think we could slice half of that book in half, I'm guessing, to let's get to stuff that we can actually help. Or talk
Well,
about.
I'm sorry, let me give a thought on, the right to farm act. Just put it in context, if I could just back up a little bit. The state of Florida is set up with home rule. The town can do anything except unless it's prohibited from doing so. Okay, it can do anything that's legal municipal purpose unless it's preempted to the state or it's prohibited by law from doing so. Okay, so you start with that big picture there. One of the things that we know we're preempted from doing falls within the Right to Farm Act. Okay, we're preempted from regulating a farming activity where best management practices have been adopted. Okay, so it's clear that if there is a best management practice for for a farming activity, I've seen the one at Town Hall for equestrian. Okay, it's clear that we fall within that preemption. Says we cannot. So no matter what you write in that book, okay, if another industry comes up and a new BMP is adopted, what we could regulate before we can no longer regulate because now we've got best management practices. Okay. That being said, just because there are no best management practices doesn't mean you have to regulate it.
Right, you
Okay?
don't have to regulate.
It's just that we're not prohibited from doing so. Okay,
Until
so
there is a BMP?
if there's a BMP, we cannot regulate it.
But if there isn't, and then you regulate,
becomes-
and then there is a state BMP, then that state BMP supersedes whatever
Correct.
regulation. Okay.
Correct.
It's a timing issue.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Power, and then we need to.
I think,
move on.
I think what John's trying to say, and I submitted a similar paper, by the way, as we distributed, and what Beck's trying to say is, when we come across stuff in the ULDC, let's just take right off the bat, shade houses for nurseries, it says they gotta be a minimum of 50 feet setback, okay? We gotta go, and we gotta handle that in the ULDC and say, take it out. So it's not like we can just ignore all that stuff, we have to take it out.
Right, and you remember, yeah, because this ULDC was adopted before they took out the word building. This is the new reality.
Here's where you get the difficulty is, we're going to wind up with a ULDC that gets very complicated if we're going to try and be very specific about what an ag building is that would be exempt from setback regulations. If we have setback regulations, we say they are setback regulations, but we've made as a preamble, a simple statement like Howard, I think, maybe has submitted, or like I submitted there, that just said, whatever these regulations are, they are subject to Florida statutes, including Florida agriculture, statutes regarding agriculture, including the Florida Right to Farm Act. And just let that be what's in the ULDC.
Preceded by the Attorney General opinion, as you stated. That's it. That's basically, we're back to what the
Yeah.
attorney
I
said.
think it'll
Attorney
make the ODC a
General-
lot simpler.
Okay, let's, Katie, go ahead. Okay. Can we wrap up this section then? Are we agreed?
Yes.
I think I would say, if you have any public comments.
Oh,
before we-
Thank you, thank
No,
you,
no,
Mike.
I knew it. This public comments?
Yes, I actually have one. Thais Gonzalez, 13090 Raymond Drive. A suggestion, whatever ordinances that could be related to ag, just write on it, you know, if it's, and you're probably gonna disagree with me on this one, but if it's got the agriculture classification granted by the tax, the property appraiser tax, yeah, property appraiser, I'm sorry. You know, it's exempt.
Well, that's,
If it's got the agriculture classification, it's exempt. Instead of changing the ULDCs and changing the rules and
Go back.
everything, just adding to it, it's exempt if it's got the ag classification.
If the property, so what you're saying is if the property tax appraiser's office has
If it's
issued,
got the agriculture classification,
if they have
granted by the
issued
property appraiser.
right, the ag classification, you're saying we should include it in
Right.
your comment?
I don't,
I
I mean,
have a
that's really a policy choice
Okay.
at that point.
I think she's saying we should not question it.
Ag exemption or ag?
Classification, the
ag
exemption
which-
does not exist. It's
Okay,
not an
so somebody
exemption.
with like half an acre that's zoned ag residential should be exempt.
In theory, they would not give them the ag classification because
Right.
the Palm Beach County
I'm just trying to
considers.
be clear on your
Yeah,
question.
yeah, no, Palm Beach County considers a whole acre.
Right,
You know,
So
if you
that's
have a
fine.
home there, they take a whole acre away from the ag classification.
That is a good question.
Which they do it because they do it. I mean, you could get
Oh, I know.
more than, you know, you can get less than an acre. If your house is only taking half an acre, and you have a whole acre, they can grant
I know.
you half acre for the ag classification and the other not.
Let me just ask one question then.
But half acre, I doubt it.
As Beck said, some of us have glanced at the ULDC, and I noticed, what is the requirement for ag? Because in here, I saw something that said you must have 5 acres to be
ag
agricultural.
exempt.
So that's-
No.
This
That's
is-
the minimum
no.
lot size in the zoning district,
Okay,
Let Mark
for
answer
the
that.
zoning district.
Mark,
So that's correct. That's what you're saying.
you
But that
have,
was gonna-
well, there were so many people talking, I couldn't hear what the answer
Go
was.
ahead, again, that's on the money.
The 5 acres is the minimum lot size in the agricultural residential zoning district.
For,
For the district, I mean.
For the district.
it's-
Minimum lot size,
it's-
basically.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. Now, there are hundreds of lots in town that are actually smaller than that,
right,
but they fall into the category of non-conforming lots.
so, just to be clear, if you're less than 5 acres, you can still have an ag classification.
I believe so.
Yeah, so I think.
Well,
Okay.
well, yes, I know that's
Because,
true.
because the next point, and I want to bring this up front as we go through this, I've mentioned this, or asked this at town council meetings, there's going to be the issue of when the House bill goes into effect for the water district. I haven't heard a legal opinion, and I believe you're still working on this, but some residents would like to know how this, if their properties will become non-conforming. If you currently have a 5 acre property and the House bill takes effect, how does that affect your property? Will your 5 acre property, will you then be non-conforming also? So I think that's something people need to be aware of.
Well,
And John, I don't even think, John,
What house bill are you talking about?
the water district House bill, because regarding the roads,
We don't have property rights.
I think
No,
she's
no, Mark-
referring to 95-361
Oh, that's
Mark-
the
as far as
town.
2014.
The district was very careful in the bill that it went through the legislature saying it's an easement, it
Right.
doesn't affect property ownership.
well,
95-361 is a title statute, but the town could elect not to take title, but to make it in the form of a public road easement.
right, so Mark and I had a brief
I think
discussion on
the answer
this.
to your question is if you're talking about as it relates to us trying to get the private property for the official right-of-way
Right.
of roadways, okay, that's what you're talking about, okay.
And some
I don't
people
see
may
that
not
as,
be
I don't
aware.
see that as an impediment because I believe we could either be amendment or through a program decision kind of go ahead and ensure that they are given a legal nonconformity. I don't know if we're taking, say we're taking a property from 5 acres down to 4.9 acres, they'll still be illegal, they'll be illegal use because we can do the appropriate amendments to.
That will not require a special exception process.
No, no.
Okay, that's,
There's language in the code now that says that if you are a non-conforming lot as a result of a right-of-way taking, you can go back and add that taken right-of-way to your property
to make a determination as to whether or not you're conforming lot. So if you're 4.9 acres, and for example, if they took 10 feet off the frontage for Okeechobee,
Right.
you can go back and add that 10 feet in to give you 5 acres, so you're not.
To avoid
that's
falling
all-
under the special
that's-
exception issue.
That's
Well,
already,
they
that's
have
already
to-
in the code.
And they have to, that's done quite a bit, because when you have rotating, especially when you have large roadways and there's very intensive uses, generally what you do to correct that, it's called a cure plan, where you try to make sure that everybody's rights are taken care of.
I just want to make sure that the other people are aware that this is something, so John knows.
Yeah, just to make a statement, people out here react violently if they think their land is being taken.
I'm not,
No, I mean, it's violent.
okay.
And
I was just concerned about the special exception
the
issue.
district was very concerned about this, and we said, look, we have original rights going back to 1917. To the extent that things have shifted over time,
Right.
and they did,
The right of
sometimes
way
a few
means-
feet, sometimes several feet. We said that under a bill similar to 95-361 that gave us the right to improve the roads, we did not want to seek the title rights to the road surface that 95-361 bestows on towns. We very specifically said, we just want this to be an established public road easement. Didn't affect anybody's land.
Right, and I just want to make sure I have a discussion before we get to special exceptions, because it talks about non-conforming properties. That was the reason I was just bringing it up, because that's our topic tonight.
I just think that if the town uses this, it really, ought to look at doing the same thing we did, just to avoid misunderstandings, because people do get violent.
Okay. All right, we are, Howard?
I just want to make a quick comment. I was supposed to bring something tonight that I figured wasn't pertinent, so I didn't look for it because I was late already. But there is a portion of the Florida Constitution which specifically says that there is no minimum lot size required for agricultural classification.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to.
I have a question.
Did you have a,
I've got something I wanted to add. You guys went back and forth as to what's going to be covered under the 604.50, and you kind of said it was, this isn't really the forum for it, we can discuss it later. But they really need to know very clear as to when they're creating these codes, when it's going to fall under 604.50 and when it's not. Because they need to know if they're creating a setback, let's say, for some kind of structure, they need to know whether that structure is going to be covered under 604.50 or it's not. And the setback might be different based on that answer. So I just hope that everybody sitting out there is clear as to when it's going to fall under 604.50.
Here's,
I believe we can put in verbiage that says unless it falls under, okay, plain and simple, and that cures all of that.
But I think here's one thing I would say. I don't have this memorized either, okay? But let's just say you have something in there that says specifically a barn cannot be this, or a barn cannot do that, which is clearly a farm building. You probably need to just take that out, because by the AGO, it's exempt from what you're doing. If it says a shade house can't be here, a shade house has to do that. You might as well, while you come up, take it out, because, so don't expressly provide for something and then have this unless blank,
so if
A
it's,
storage building, though, however.
You may not know, so but you may come across them that says a barn, or it may say something that's clearly a farm building or fence or sign, again, I don't have it memorized, you might as, we know it's exempt now, so unless you want to regulate it in the hopes that the exemption is removed, I wouldn't, I
as an
don't think that's
example,
something you should
let
ask
me give you an
for.
example of what we're talking about tonight before you have to go. Commercial equestrian facility. Again, I haven't seen the current supplements to, I think it may have been updated definition, but it's still 18 stalls or commercial.
It hasn't changed from what it was originally. I think you asked me a question one night to interpret what that definition meant, and I struggled a little bit with that.
Right, we still struggle with that, I think. So we have an issue of because in Wellington, what commercial means is different to what commercial may mean here.
By definition, in my opinion, I might be completely wrong, by definition, agriculture is commercial. I mean, you don't grow strawberries, corn, blueberries to eat them all yourself. By definition, agriculture is a commercial industry.
Bonafide ag is for sure.
Yeah, bona fide ag is
Okay.
commercial. I mean, why would you grow anything if you're not gonna sell it?
Just remember that as we get to special exception table.
Remember that, gentlemen?
It is regulated differently,
Yes.
but it is commercial, so I've never heard of commercial equestrian stable, but
Wait
do
till
we have a definition for that?
Okay, we're ready to move on?
Sure.
Okay, let's get on to 2B.
Yeah, let me just say that since your last meeting, Member Warren has sent to me 2 emails that were very thought-provoking. One of them is on the one-way communication as it relates to the Sunshine Law, and I'm very concerned about that one, because that it's very important. There's a lot of pitfalls with that. So what I did is I had asked Mike to opine on my behalf to both emails, and what I wanted to do is cover them now, and since Mike is here, he can do it, but then if not, I'll pick up where he leaves off. So with that, I'd like to go to that 2B,
Page 68.
B2, one-way communication, yes, page 68.
Page 68 of the
Yes.
agenda.
Yeah, and I think it's probably just the way that the question was phrased, because it was used communication between members, and that kind of caused a little bit of a concern for me, and I don't know if that's what was intended with the questions, but I wanted to answer the questions as they were phrased. The issue with the Sunshine Law and the public records, and you went through that, is you've got to have a presumption that everything has got to be in the open. Okay, you don't start with it's, you know, we'll open it up only if we have to. It's open. Okay, an email is such an easy thing to just send out a rush of thought, a flow of stream of consciousness type thing. And it's easy for you all because, you know, one of you might say, I've got this great thought on something and I just don't want to forget to tell you all about it, and you send it out. Okay, that in and of itself is not an issue. But the issue becomes someone responds to it. Someone else on the board responds to it. Someone hits reply all or something. Even something innocuous as got it. Okay, what did you get? Did you get the email or did you get the point? And so it invites issues, and so we have commissioners who, when they get an email, they hit reply all, and they send out this thing, and just please no one respond. Okay, not here and other places. Okay, because again, the first one out of the box to send it out isn't violating the Sunshine Law unless someone responds. Then guess what? You both are. So, it's a cautionary thing, and I feel, if you can funnel things, through Mark, and he can get it back to you in a public forum, he's not going to be a conduit. He's not going to, but he gets it, and he's not on board. He can provide it evenly to all you all, if it's part of your package or something like that. But you're not talking with each other, because it's a meeting. An email exchange is a meeting, just like a phone call. And so that was my only point in trying to just kind of re-emphasize. I would prefer that the business of the board not be done by email, except for getting information on meetings from the town manager. But I can't prohibit it.
All right, so the bottom line is, if I have a brilliant idea that I want everybody to consider before we come to the next meeting, the safest way to handle it is something Mark suggested, in which I also put in the email. Instead of me sending it to everybody on the board, I send it to Mark, knowing that he is going to forward the email to all the members, and therefore anybody that wants to hit reply can hit reply, and it doesn't come back to any of us, and he can ignore it if he wishes. So there's no breach
Unless you
at that
get
point.
reply all and he sent that in one email. Well, probably what happened if you have a brilliant idea, what I would tell Mark is to collect the ideas and provide it to you all. Like, I don't know if you want to come up with a process where you get communications, once a week, or you get it with your agenda or something.
Well, the whole idea is to get it prior to the agenda so we can move this whole thing along.
I
So
understand.
people don't come here seeing an idea for the first time. They can come here with
But if
preconceived
everybody
ideas.
reviews their packet before they get here, anyway.
But we have 2 days to review it.
The packet comes, boom.
Again, that is something that maybe logistically with you can have, maybe, I don't know if there's a way you can have a box
Well,
there for
let me-
members to come by
let
and
me
pick up
throw
things
something.
every Friday.
Let me
But
throw
that's for
something.
you guys to work out logistically.
But we can send it to Mark and have Mark
You can
send
collect
it
it.
one way to everyone.
Is there a way to set, and I know there is, I just don't know how, but I know there is a way to set up a deal that where Mark sends us an email where you cannot respond to it?
Blind carbon copy.
Pardon?
BCC, blind carbon copy. That's all you
But
gotta
we
do.
can't respond to anybody. So we get the email, we get the brilliant idea from
I
Howard,
love that idea.
and we cannot respond to anybody. If we want to respond to Mark, we have to respond to Mark, not to anybody
If
else.
there's a way to do that, I would say God bless.
Is it
okay?
legal to do BCC? Does that affect the sunshine law if we do BCC?
Well, the issue is on Mark's end, it'll print out as a BCC.
And
so
what I'm
if
saying, is
someone-
that inappropriate for him to?
Not
do
if we don't,
BCC?
but if we respond to Mark, and even if we hit reply all, it doesn't go to anybody else because we don't know anybody else.
Reply all is evil when it comes to sunshine law, okay? It's just, it's evil.
Okay,
Okay,
so,
I
so,
use reply all the time. If Mark sends an email without forwarding it, if he cut and pastes the verbiage and sends an email, you can hit reply all you want, and it's not going to anybody but Mark.
if that works, God bless, I would
Okay.
love it, okay?
At the end of the
But
day, you're gonna get in trouble.
Okay.
I just don't want you guys
No
to
reply
fall
all.
into something.
I'll move to the Bahamas.
And that's when, and I added gratuitous language at the end about text messages, okay? Because everybody texts, and in fact, well, I say everybody, but, and we fought the fight last year with the commissioner in another venue, and his cell phone was subpoenaed for his text messages. The person who got the text messages had kept them. He didn't. Did he fall within the retention problem? Did he have a retention? Did he violate the public records law by not retaining his own records of text messages? Because phone settings don't retain text messages like Outlook retains emails, and it was a nightmare. It was a quagmire. And so, and the technology and sunshine law,
Don't jihad.
exactly right. In public records law, they do not mix, because you can do something now in a text message as complicated as you can in an email, and yet it is sometimes very difficult to retain those. And so I discourage everybody from texting town business. Now, just because you text each other about complimenting, congratulations on your kids doing this, or are you going to this thing, or whatever, that's not, that's all. But texting somebody and say, hey, did you see what, Virginia said on this? I think she's nuts, whatever, no offense.
Hey, they
See,
all
Virginia,
say
you're
it.
calling me nuts already.
You're having a debate, again, on a text message. So please, on that respect, don't fall. And in the blogs. Blogs is an interesting one, okay? Because whose record is that? The Attorney General has told us informally that it was the commissioner's responsibility to keep a copy of what he posted on a blog that he posted relating to something that was going on in the city. And I said, whoa, wait a second, okay? Why isn't the Sun Sentinel, or why isn't the Broward Beat, or why isn't somebody else who's soliciting that information responsible for retaining it? I said, well, the commissioner's responsible for it. So you get a public records request for all web postings. Now, if you get that, and what you all posting on some website, your thoughts on the ULDC, two things can happen there. That's an opportunity for a debate because someone else posts something, even though you're not talking directly to each other. And the second thing is somebody says, I want to get copies of all your blog postings. Did you keep it? Did they keep it? So again, it hasn't
you're
caught
making
up.
your computer, everything on your computer is basically accessible during that process.
Arguably, somebody will try.
Yes.
So, and I know you guys have less of a concern, but I know how important this committee is and the issues that this committee addresses, and they can touch raw nerves. So it's going to be easy for people to get into discussions and different forums, and you all have a different responsibility than those folks.
Right.
And so,
We're advisory, we're not setting
know,
it, we're
but
strictly advisory.
I understand, and I hope it doesn't happen, but you all don't have the same level of training that, say, the commissioners get, the same reinforcement that the commissioners get on all these rules, and so.
Speaking of training, are you going over, are we going to be getting information? Was that sent out to everyone for taking the course? Did everyone
It's in
get
your
that?
packet.
Of course, of who?
Beth?
Ethics.
Howard?
It's in-
God, I ain't got it, there's nothing ethical left.
It's in your packet,
Okay.
In which packet did you send?
the agenda packet.
Tonight.
Oh, okay, okay. I have,
It's
just haven't.
required, are you? when-
We can, I mean, I hadn't prepared anything for it, but, I mean.
No, just let them know that
You
they
can
have-
go on the Palm Beach County Code of Ethics website, watch the video.
Yeah, it's not that
It's
hard.
painless, really, it's relatively painless.
Is that pretty much it, is just sit there and watch?
And then you certify that you watched the video.
You sign the form and turn it into Sue.
Now, I won't get into the debate whether there's anything in the code that mandates you watch the video, because if I were to tell you that there was, I'd be lying. But they've interpreted it that way, and so people were just watch the video, sign the form, and you're
Be
done.
done with it.
Doesn't harm you to watch the video.
Is there a time limit on that? Like, do I need to?
Soon.
Pretty quick.
Because what they did, we discovered last year, is they asked us for a list of all of our committees and all of our committee members. Then they asked Sue, because you filed with Sue, to provide copies of all the affidavits, and then they tell us who didn't do it. Okay? It's like, we know who didn't do it, but we have to go through that exercise every year. So don't make us send them something and then have them come back and say you didn't do it, because we know you didn't do it. So just as soon as you can do it, file it with Susan. It'll save us having to deal with the folks down by the airport.
So we've taken care of
Did you
two.
say anything you wanted to say about 2A and 2B and 2? First one was the one
And
with,
three,
second one was
actually,
the
I think- yeah, I think so.
we've done 2 and 3, haven't we?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if you had any questions. I think there were follow-ups from the presentation you had, but I hope that I kind of explained why I have my.
And then the other one was the imperative determinations that Howard sent relative to ag matters for the most part.
Oh, we're gonna just, you want that discussion
Well, it's-
now?
I mean, I don't know if Mike has any comments, he may not have any.
Well, I think, for example, I may have, like, number 2, I answered the way it is because of the way it was phrased, but I think what you meant was, can we go against the concept, if there's a statutory definition, can we just change the definition in order to regulate it? And no, we can't do that, okay? I didn't go into it a lot of detail here, but I think it's your prerogative, if you want to use, instead of, you can define a term for purposes of the ULDC, okay? But I think it's clear, if you want to do it this way, is if there's already defined in the statutes, why reinvent the wheels? But you can, as long as we don't get into a conflict with it, because there's not many definitions in the Constitution. There are some, but most of them are in the statutes, and most of them all say, for purposes of this chapter, for purposes of this section, because we may use the same word for purposes of our ULDC, but what we can't do is use that word and then do something that the statutes prohibit, like right to farm. We can't just, so if it rose by any other rose.
John?
I really think it's getting into dangerous area. I think a simple statement, we're going to abide by the state statutes and
Right, that's basically what you're saying, just keep.
If and if there's a concern over a word and it's defined, and I've given Mark a resource, and probably hasn't had a chance to get it yet.
No, I
But there's an
haven't.
index of just where you find definitions in
So
the
Mark,
Florida
you guys-
statutes. So if you come across a word like agriculture, you look in that index, it'll tell you everywhere it's defined in the statutes, in the Constitution, in the statutes. Farm, it'll tell you everywhere that word is defined. Okay, so it might be useful when you're looking at a word, saying, well, is this defined anywhere in the statutes? It may be defined, but in a section that is relevant to what you're doing, so there's no harm in you defining it.
Classic is road.
Yeah, road.
Roadway, road, travel, I mean, it comes up so many times.
So that might be, I recommended that to Mark, and I think we can be providing
We are gonna get it.
something for you guys on that.
All right, Howard.
My issue, which I saw as a major stumbling block as we went along, is the three people that I believe are responsible for writing the majority of the ULDC just went ahead and invented definitions in certain instances that have not been challenged, which conflict in either major or minor ways with what's in the statutes. And basically where this is coming from is, I think every one of the definitions in our ULDC needs to be held up against definitions that already exist in the book you mentioned, and if there's any major differences, they need to be amended.
Jim?
I've got a specific question I'd like to ask Mike before he leaves, that's it. That's directly related to
That
this.
clock is fast.
Oh, okay.
But go ahead.
If you can turn to page 13 of 90, that's the next agenda item.
Thank you.
We're actually creating a definition of residential agricultural sales and services.
Which Howard questioned at the last meeting.
Howard questioned last time because he said that hay sales of hay that was not grown, harvested, whatever, on site, was imported, would not be an agricultural good. And my question to Mike is, since we are creating our own definition that's going to be used specifically in our own code, can we have the word agricultural in that definition?
Well, you can, but again, it's for purposes of this code.
Right.
Now, now that being said, if there's a term that you prefer to use, so there's no confusion, that's fine too.
Right.
But, you know, agricultural sales or agricultural services or agricultural sales and services or residential agricultural sales and services, I don't think that set of words has a specific definition in statutes, but agricultural does, residential does, I'm sure sales and services do. But the way you put it together, I don't think that there is if you put it in quotations and look for it, you would find that as it is.
My concern is the creation of confusion between what is, what I'll call for my sake, legitimate agricultural sales, meaning John has a nursery, he raises a plant, and he sells it, as opposed to Walmart selling that plant to the consumer, saying they're selling an agricultural product.
Yeah.
I think the two need to be described in a different way so there's no confusion, and that's where this came
I
from.
understand your comments totally, but let me just say this. In one of the rules in drafting zoning ordinances, and specifically in drafting definitions is, and you have to remember this because it's a common and basic rule, is that you do not regulate through a definition. So you got to remember that. Because you have a definition doesn't mean you're regulating. The definition is there just to assist you to understand a term that is being used in the ordinance. And Jim's point on asking Mike is a good one, because technically this definition that was written for this was not done to violate any state statute or mess around with any state definition. It was done to describe an activity that is going on in the town. That's all it is. It's not, the definition itself, if you read it, doesn't regulate a thing.
Can I ask a simple question? Why wouldn't we, and I kind of know what the response might be, but why wouldn't we have just put this under the home business category? Why wouldn't we have just expanded on home businesses?
That's a good idea.
Because
I'm not going to get into what this cost us,
yeah, well, number one,
this little baby. But why wouldn't we just put it under home business?
the home businesses can't have customers come to the house.
But I thought, and I'm getting back to our last town council meeting, where I thought there was comment, and I understand now what it says as a town council meeting is not necessarily what happens in the ULDC. I realize that it has to, there's a step that takes
You're right.
place. And at the last town council meeting, there was discussion of allowing the ammo guy to have 3 customers under home business.
At a time.
Yeah,
So-
well, I mean, if we're gonna put all retail sales activities of a small nature under home business, then that opens up any kind of retail business, customers, truck traffic, whatever, to any property in town. I mean, do you want that?
Well, and you need to ask yourself.
What do you mean, as I'm waiting for the tractor delivering the shavings, I'm collecting Canal Road that I can't get around? I mean, I assume we're gonna pretend there's no traffic in this town right now?
I'm not pretending, but but it's specifically allowing this business and not the entire range of retail activities.
Okay, so that's why it was not put in a home business. Well, see, now you say home businesses as if they're all retail. Not all home businesses are retail.
No, but I think what they're saying is
They
that
can't
home
have
businesses aren't retail. They're like having an office there that you're a stockbroker or something.
Okay, so that's why,
And there's a specific limit on the number of employees also. Now, we had a limit on the number of employees in this, but the council took it off.
right,
So if we're gonna have unlimited employees
right.
and unlimited customers, we might as well just zone the entire town commercial.
We
Hey,
have raised
that's
that.
what
I
I'm
mean, and I tell you
questioning.
what, we're working on a moratorium on Okeechobee Road, so bear that in mind, it's an important
Well, this
consideration.
is why this one concerns me, because this is like Pandora's box. This title and this whole issue.
Understand though too, that one of the reasons why this is written the way it's written is because when this came up at town council was pretty specific in terms of giving some general parameters to the town attorney, town planner, and myself in terms of what they wanted to see. So what we were trying to do is, based upon that direction, we were trying to write an ordinance that met those criteria.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't want to jump into a discussion of this agenda, Mike. I just wanted to ask Mike that one question.
But I will agree with the concept that, you know, if you make this thing user-friendly, if you can, by definition, it's not going to be. But if you find something that you think is confusing just because of the word choice, you know, that's not a bad thing to look at.
Notwithstanding.
Notwithstanding.
I hate that word.
I'm sorry, I'm really that I have to cut it short. I had a meeting that I have to get to, so you send me, I have to reply all.
Don't reply to everybody.
All right.
But is the bottom line that it's easier to use this kind of an approach regarding the hay sales to avoid worse unintended consequences?
I think that's why it's written as specific for that one type of activity, yes.
So there are worse unintended consequences?
Well, you don't know, maybe the unintended consequences are great, but, you know, that's the deal, that's why they're unintended, we don't know, they could be bad, most of the time they result in something you don't see, and it's not usually what you would like to see.
I don't think any of us want to convert the whole town into commercial.
Yeah, so, but thank you, and, you know,
Thank you, Mike.
Mark,
Appreciate
and if he feels the need for me to come back, I'll come back. All right.
So we'll continue with the hay ordinance
Mike.
then?
All right.
Oh, yeah, we won't do that.
Right, well, we're on it, so we're on it.
Okay.
Let's
By the way, Madam Chair, before Jim launches
Good night.
in, I
Good
know
night.
we are deliberating here during the supper hour, dinner hour, so we do have some snacks here for you. If somebody should get hungry while we're going through these.
I've submitted a handout to everybody. I mentioned to the town council. Literally, now, let me say at the outset, you guys, being Jim and Mark, you did what you were directed to do, and you did a marvelous job doing what you were directed to do. Okay, having said that, I don't believe that, I think the town council got caught up in its own inertia and directed you to do things that had unintended consequences. Okay, the idea was never to give everybody on every street of Loxahatchee Groves the ability to open up a retail feed store. The object was to give the Ikes, period, end of sentence, the ability to keep going. And we also have several other businesses within the Groves that are going to fall under that. Now, it was mentioned at the town meeting, oh, no way you're going to be able to come up with something that's going to include all those people and exclude everybody else. Well, there is, and I took my best stab at it, and that's the handout I gave to all of you. I believe a code or a regulation that says what I have outlined here, and of course we can talk about the details, will handle all of those people and prohibit anybody else from getting involved, which is what the town council really wanted. And I've spoken with the Ikes, and just as everybody else in the town is unhappy with the consequences of what was written, which you were told to write that way, okay? Even the Ikes are not happy with it. But this is something that allows them to continue and closes the book on that. and I would just like it to be open for consideration.
John?
I remember an awful lot of discussion over problems associated with grandfather. And I think the compromise was special exceptions. And you listed 3 categories of special exceptions. I think that a 4th category of special exceptions, similar to what Howard has here, is the right way to go, because it brings it before the town council. It lets them consider these kind of qualifications, and I think there was an intent to recognize businesses that were here before the town incorporated. But I think that the idea was that it needs to come before the town council, and if they feel on the review that these items are adequate to say, okay, you've got a special exception, or if they feel that maybe there might be 1 or 2 conditions, but otherwise you satisfy this, they can do that. But I think that would be a category D of the special exceptions. But I think it should come before the town council, because that was clear that they wanted the ability to have the existing businesses come before them so that they could be reviewed in the general context of, hey, you know, how about your neighbors, you know, how about, you know, whatever else is involved in your local business that was here before the town incorporated.
Just a comment, Madam Chair, and then what I'd like to do is let Jim go through the whole hay sales ordinance if we can. But just a comment on Member Ryan's comment, and because, I mean, this is not a criticism, it's just a caveat for you to all think about, is you've got, as it relates to special exceptions, you have to be very careful with special exceptions in terms of designating something a special exception, because a special exception is a form of quasi-judicial type use. It's a form of permitted use. And when it falls into that quasi-judicial category, most of the time, most special exceptions should be approved. Because all they have to do is show by evidence that they meet all the general qualifications of a special exception. And then the burden shifts back to the town to prove why, under extraordinary means, this special exception should not be granted. So the only point I'm making there is if you go the special exception route, you have a hard time denying them, because, and it can't be just because people don't like it. It's not a popularity contest kind of thing. You have to, but it's now it's quasi-judicial, it's evidentiary in terms of its review.
I think the town council knew that when they were putting these together, that they said, okay, you know, we don't want it to be a broad grandfathering with a lot of unintended consequences.
Right.
You know, that could be as bad as putting a burden on them. But I think that if you had a category that had, say, like Howard's criteria listed and said there's a presumption if you met all of these requirements, then you bring it to the town council and say, I think I'm entitled to be a special exception. But if the town council at that hearing has A, B, or C brought up, and they say, okay, if you deal with A, B, and C, you've got a special exception. I think that's kind of the sense I got out of all the efforts that.
Well, I agree, and that does work until you have somebody where people surrounding residences and people don't want it or don't like it.
Well, that was the whole purpose of having the special exception. They said, you know, if you're a good neighbor, you're not going to have people come up and say, we don't want
And
you.
then as long as that you can prove that you're meeting all the tests, and then you're
Right.
good, because you can't take it as a.
But that was the whole, you know, whether it was Dave Browning or Dennis Lip or whoever else, that was how they kind of grounded it. That we don't want to be a problem for people that have been out here for a long time, but we'd like everybody to be a responsible operator in whatever special exception that they were asking for. And the town council wanted the right to look at it and presumably grant it.
In my opinion, being a member of the public and since the get-go, okay, the unintended consequence that you just talked about in my mind, is purposeful, okay? Because as long as a business meets all of these criteria, even if everybody on the town council hates the person and doesn't want him to be in business, they should have no choice.
That's right.
And that's the whole idea. If all of a sudden they all decide they hate the Ikes, they shouldn't be able to say, well, no, you can't do it anymore, we decided because we'll find something.
Well, this special exemption has a time limit. In a few more years, it pretty much expires, because the first sentence says, the town recognizes that it has a historical legacy of businesses within its borders that have existed for a minimum of a decade prior to incorporation, without generating complaints from neighbors, etc. So there is already a time limit set from whatever point that incorporation is, which of course can be dictated or whatever that day, the day of incorporation, the day of the council being elected, whatever. But there is a set date that from that point backwards, 10 years, if those people have been in good standing with the community, for lack of a better way of saying it,
They have the right.
They have the right, no matter what. If the neighbors don't say anything, whatever, they go on, well, it expires. Because 30 years from now, those 10 years are way long gone.
That's a good point.
I don't think that the town council intended it to be 100% automatic. I think if you fulfill these kind of conditions here, you've got a very strong argument. But I think that the town council wanted the right to say, okay, we're looking at this, we realize that this makes up the bulk of our decision. It's in line with what our objectives were, but we want to look at A, B, or C just as items that would be important to us in a final okay. And, that's, I think that, it's not just we're saying, okay, we give you this, and we tell you this, and it's a rubber stamp that you give us a special exception.
Well, what Howard has
Jim,
done
well,
is...
Jim, sorry.
Okay, hold on. If you can look at page 148, real quickly, I think the council, and this is language that's currently in the...
I'm sorry, Jim, 140, we have 90.
140, no, it's page 148, 222.
66 of 90. We'll never find it.
Okay, well...
Is that right?
Oh, 66, I'm sorry.
Yeah, 66 of 90.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry, that was taken.
Okay, what are we looking at?
66 of 90. That's section 75-035. If I turn it over. That's in the code now, and I think that was the council's original intent to address this issue. And one of the reasons why this didn't work, I believe, is that they only had 8 months to file for a special exception. I think probably nobody in town knew about it.
Okay,
And if they did eventually find out about it, the 8 months was gone. So,
it sounds to me like then what they're saying here, based on what you're saying, nobody knew about this. And it sounds to me like what Howard and Beck and John are saying, that this is something perhaps, I mean, I realize we're on the hay issue right now, but this is something that perhaps they'd like to
we could
make an advisory on. We've jumped the gun a little bit, but.
We could update this section to incorporate something like how it's.
And that could be the basis of dealing with the hay as opposed to the special ordinance.
Well,
It could be.
just one quick question.
Thank you.
What day do we incorporate? What is considered the day of incorporation?
October 1st, 2006.
October 1st, okay.
When did we vote? Is that the day we voted for incorporation?
No, that was the day that it became effective.
Well, from the time of election? From the
The
time of election?
The governor signed the bill.
From the time of election?
No, the elections didn't take place until March of 2007.
Town didn't start operating until after that.
No, I'm talking about the original election to incorporate. Or we made a decision to incorporate, yes or no? Because this is what happened.
2006?
And this has been my argument, is that you say October 1st, 2006. And it's like, how much, I understand, but from the time that we decided we wanted to say, yes, we're going to incorporate, from that point to this point, a lot of businesses moved in here. Because they said, look, the county's out of it, we can jump in there.
Well, I think.
What is that? What is
makes
that?
it a little more difficult for them to get a special exception.
With this way, if they jumped in there 8 months, they'd be in. With Howard's way, where they have to prove that they've been there a decade before incorporation, to me, that's right. That is the clause.
That was the intent.
Yeah.
That was the intent,
And
what Howard was saying. You know, it was, we don't want to be harmful to anybody that's been doing whatever they've been doing.
A good citizen.
Good
Yes,
citizens
yes.
and responsible.
All right, Howard, then we're gonna get back to this.
Okay, section C under this, that we were just reading, it expires 8 months. Okay? I will tell you that from every impression I ever got, that was never the intention. Okay? If you fall under that category and you can prove you were here and operating under those circumstances, you are not obligated. This stuff was written in afterward as the inertia pushed people forward to do things that they really didn't want to do. If somebody has been here a decade prior to incorporation and they can show it and prove it, they shouldn't lose that right to a special exception because they didn't come into the town office in any particular year and say, here I am, I've been running around naked and I didn't realize it was illegal.
Right, Howard, and that's what John and Beck, I think, have agreed with you on. They've just agreed. So can we go ahead and how would you like to do this? We have two things here. This is a great idea. You
Yes.
guys want to go through the hay ordinance and then
Well,
discuss this?
that may allow for the hay ordinance.
Exactly, that's the
Yes.
intention of that.
The idea with the Ikes was they were here 17 years.
Absolutely.
So Jim,
Absolutely.
But I think we do have to go through this because council has directed it back for you guys to take a look at. So in fairness to their directive, I think we should just,
go through it, and then we're going to come back to this at the end.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay?
Let's go through this with the assumption that this is going to be the vehicle that this finally adopted. And this ordinance has gone through the planning and zoning board, and it has gone through first reading of the ordinance at the council. So I think that's why we should go through it, in case the council decides
For
that
legal.
this is the direction it wants to go. At least you'll have a chance to make your comments. I mean, if they decide to go with the other recommendation, fine. Okay. That's in, that I think works just as well. Maybe go.
It also takes in the other businesses,
Yes, it does.
which this doesn't.
Okay. Just a little brief background on this as to why we got to the point of writing this ordinance. The ordinance was, the issue was originally raised as a result of 4 code enforcement violations for retail sales of hay without an appropriate approval, a site plan approval or zoning approval. And after receiving a notice of violation at the June 5th council meeting, Gerald and Janet Ike appeared and requested that the council give some consideration for their long-standing operation, which essentially was the issue that we've been discussing tonight. And as a result of that request, council directed staff to review the matter and propose possible remedies. We came back at the June council meeting and proposed a game plan, if you will, as to how we propose to address the issue. And we outlined the basic components of the ordinance that we proposed to put in, which are included in the ordinance, and we got direction from the council to go ahead and proceed and write the ordinance on that basis. So, with that in mind, go through the ordinance a little bit, just so you can see some of the specifics and also have a chance to ask any questions. The scope of the businesses are essentially limited to straw, hay, feed, and grain sales. And this ordinance allows existing businesses to remain. And it also sets up a series of conditions that have to be met if a new business is proposed. And finally, it creates sunset provisions for the business that are tied to maintaining a homestead designation on the property as well as a business tax receipt. The basic contents of the ordinance is that,
What page you're?
Oh, okay, I guess this would be starting on page 13 of 19.
19 and 19.
13 of 19, I'm sorry. The ordinance contains three basic provisions. The first is to create a definition for the term residential agricultural sales and services. The second section is a revision to permitted uses in the agricultural district. And on page 13, under item number 2, add section 2015. That's a table that's extracted from the agricultural residential district that, in a sense, lists all of the accessory uses that are currently allowed in the agricultural residential district. And we have added in the bottom row the residential agricultural sales and services use as an accessory use. Permitted subject to Article 80. Article 80 is the section of the town code that identifies conditional uses and the specific conditions under which particular condition uses are allowed in the town. And then the third code revision is the addition of section 80-60 to the conditional uses and outlines a couple of pages worth of conditions that new businesses would have to meet in order to be permitted as an accessory use in the agricultural residential district.
New businesses or old businesses?
New businesses. Old businesses are permitted to exist as they currently are structured.
Okay.
New businesses would have to come in for conditional use approval under the conditions that start on item number 3 on page 13.
Just a note on that, one of the things that you have to understand is that you can't write an ordinance for one use. And that's what we were trying to address that issue, because that's being arbitrary and capricious, it's giving a special privilege to one user. That's why we had to be careful to try to write something up that would protect the town. You wouldn't have an influence of these things starting to happen. So that's why you see a lot of conditions that some councils thought were fairly tough in the previous deliberation. So with that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. You can't be accused of writing a spot in zone element.
Yeah,
That's why you created the structure.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly.
That's right. And just to run through some of the key provisions of section 80, 80-160. The owner of the business must also own the property and reside on the property. The agricultural sales and services use must be an accessory use to the principal use of a single-family dwelling. And certain uses, due to their potential impacts, must also receive special exception approval. Now, we originally had in there that one of these businesses that receives shipments via tractor-trailer rigs had to go through the special exception process, but the council eliminated that from the ordinance. So the only activity that has to be reviewed through the special exception process now is if the business owner is storing hay in trailers on the property. We want to make sure that they're screened from the roads and from the neighbors, and don't create an incompatibility with the neighbors. Yes.
You used the verbiage a few moments ago, one of these businesses, plural. I was under the impression there was only one. Is there more than one at the present time, other than the
There was 4 that were originally the subject of code violations. One of them has moved. So to my knowledge, there's currently 3.
Well, there may be some
And-
others you don't know
and-
about.
No, that's true, because keep in mind, the town's code enforcement function is not proactive. It does not go out and seek code violators. It responds to complaints. So it's very possible that there could be several out there that we don't, that I don't know about.
I don't know if Howard was at this town council meeting when it came up, but there were several people that were doing the same thing that the Ikes were doing, you know, on a small scale. And they had been doing it for years. And they just looked at it as, I'm buying in bulk, that's for me primarily, but when I buy it in bulk, I don't need it in bulk, and I can sell some of it to help
Offset their expenses.
offset their expenses and help the neighbors out. Now, I think there was at least, you know, half a dozen people that came to that meeting and.
Right, and there are some renters doing it also. There's some people that go on Connecting Canal, I suspect that I've heard of renters, so that don't fit in this category, that are taking advantage of the situation, possibly, that, like you said, it's not proactive. All right, so continue.
Yeah, and we would be allowing them to have one sign out on the road of a maximum of 12 square feet. And that was a regulation that I was considering not putting in there, not allowing a sign, but in talking to a couple of the operators, current operators, they don't need the sign necessarily to advertise the fact that they have a business. Most of them have repeat customers, and they operate at various hours. And they need the sign to let customers know when they're open. Not necessarily that here's a business that we drive by, come on and buy some hay. It's that if you're a customer of mine driving by, you can tell whether or not I'm open, so you don't drive back into my property if I'm not open. That's the main reason for a sign. And we've identified hours of operation, essentially 6 days a week, 8 to 8, Monday through Friday. I think it was
8 to 8, 5 days per week on Saturdays, and Sundays 12 p.m. to 5.
Yeah, 8 to 8, 5 days, Sundays 12 to 8. That's changed a lot, that's why I need to go back and read myself. 8 to 8, 5 days a week, and on Saturdays, and on Sundays 12 to 5.
Oh, it says 5 days a week, 8 to 8, 5 days per week, and on Saturdays.
Yes.
And Sundays 12 to 5.
Right.
I mean,
That was-
Sunday was the only one.
Right, because that was at town council, there was discussion,
That
because
was-
their horses are hungry, they need to eat on Sunday.
That was specific council direction to put that language in there. And then we have the section in there about residential agricultural sales and services uses as of the effective date of this ordinance may continue to operate. And that, in a short brief presentation, that's essentially the contents of the ordinance and
Okay.
answer questions.
So we've gone through that, and you guys presented this, so let's hear how you'd like to combine it. Let's start with John and then Howard.
Well, you know, I found that there were some things in here that it really didn't hit me right off the bat, that separately we were considering the existing businesses like the Ikes and then the new businesses. I kind of read this and said, do all of the people that have been operating this have to comply with all these requirements? And then it looked like when I was reading this, even though this is a list of requirements, under F, it says shall require a special exception. So I kind of got the feeling that there was going to be more than just what was listed here. So I was just a little bit unsure.
Yeah.
What else.
Yeah. In an attempt to not over-regulate, which is a recurring theme on the town council, the only thing that requires a special exception is if you're using sandwich trailers to store the hay on your site. To essentially make sure that you continue to be a good neighbor, that's all.
Well, how would you, excuse me, Howard, go ahead.
Well, I got a couple of things.
Okay, let me just, Beck, do you have anything?
No, I'm waiting for everybody to.
Let me, yeah, you'll finish up at the end. My question to you on as an example, because I only know the Ike's property, and I know their center trailer sit in the back, and it's a small thing they've had for years, which would qualify under this 10-year existing. And you mentioned screening. Why would they need to screen in their trailers if it's that far back on their property?
Well,
That we can ask for that,
well, yeah, you're looking at the ice property only.
right?
This ordinance applies, to any new business.
Any new business.
And, yeah, I mean, they could come in with a special exception, and as part of the special exception application, they could say, okay, we're gonna put all of our trailers back in behind this barn. Therefore, that's screened, and does that adequately meet the ordinance, and the council may say yes.
So one thing that I'm hearing that for us to think about advising is, do we want this to apply to new businesses or perhaps just old businesses from what I've heard discussed? I'm just thinking of the points as everyone's brought them up. Is one point I'm hearing that we can comment on, whether this does include new business or should just stick with old.
What this is related to.
The comment that this ag sales refers to previous and new business, and you presented this. I'm just looking at the points everyone's discussed. So one of the points to consider is, do we want to suggest that perhaps this should not be for new, that new business should be eliminated from this, and it should just go with the, that's one point already. Okay, go ahead, Howard.
I thought that was the point to begin with for the ordinance, is to allow existing businesses not to open up to new businesses.
Exactly.
That's number one.
Right.
Before we move on to that lengthy discussion, I would like to make one recommendation that came up at the town council meeting. And with that, I won't be all upset with Jim's word use anymore. If we just add the word residential agricultural support sales and services and stick in the word support, I'll shut up about that whole thing, because that would specifically separate the sale of legitimate, because let's face it, you can accuse me of residential agricultural sales, because I have a bird farm and I sell all my birds by sitting in my house talking on a telephone. No, nobody comes to my place, I ship them all out of the airport, but technically, I got a home office that the IRS lets me declare, so I would like the word support sales, because you're talking about that.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate then. Does that mean, don't shoot me, Howard. Does that mean we're going to be selling tractors when you say support sales?
No, it's still limited to the definition.
No, they still have
Residential support.
hay and shaving.
Everything stays the same except, support.
Okay.
And I think that's something Jim and I both agree with. I think it's a good recommendation. The only thing, from a protocol standpoint, I would request that you do a motion on that so that the whole...
Are we at the point of making a motion?
When you're ready,
I want to go through all
On
these
this
points.
finite point, yes.
Okay.
Good.
Well, do I need to make the motion or?
No, I'm just saying you can
I'll
call
make
for
a
a motion in a
motion,
second and then
change
take a
to
vote.
add the word support before the word agricultural, wherever it appears in this ordinance.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any opposed? Do we have to ask if anyone's opposed?
I am going to, just for this only reason, not that I disagree with you by any means, but the reason I'm gonna, is because I don't think we've addressed this whole thing yet. And if we're gonna do this, if we're gonna go more in this direction, then
We don't need the word support.
we don't need this whole thing over here.
Yeah, but like Jim said, what if the town council says, no, we don't want this, we want to stay with this?
Okay, then yes.
We're just adding the word support right now, that's all we're doing, John.
Yeah,
So we had a motion, we had a second, we had one opposed, all in,
No, we don't.
a word discussion?
Go ahead.
Yeah. I think this is a discussion I'd almost like to have off the record. Can I do that?
There's that big sun out there that says we already talked about it.
I have to be the referee now on this.
Okay, how do we handle this, John?
All right.
Has
Do we
to-
take
a break? Is this the time to take a break for snacks? Should we take a break, or we have a motion?
No,
This is all being recorded.
This is how it came up. I was at the magistrate's hearing yesterday because I was interested in the second item that we never got to. But the first item was Wellington's Edge. And Seth Brower made public comment to the magistrate that he was very concerned about Beck voting on any issue that related to the complaint that brought him before the magistrate. So I wish I had Mike here so he could kind of tell us what the protocol is. But I don't know, I didn't want to get in a situation where, Beck shouldn't vote. I don't know whether he should or shouldn't.
Whether he needs to recuse himself of this issue.
If he believes he has a conflict, Beck in his mind, I'm not speaking for Beck, may not believe he has a conflict. Just because Seth throws out an allegation doesn't necessarily mean it's true.
Because this is in a residential area, this is not in a commercial zone, Beck is in a commercial zone.
Not now.
Well, and said the whole thing at the magistrate hearing was he was filing an application for commercial on his operation. So I just don't know how the pieces fit together,
Right, I
but I
understand.
didn't want us to get in a situation we regretted being in.
I totally see where you're coming from, and that's one of the things on why it's, and I've told this to a lot of people, anybody that listen to me. It's very hard for me as a resident of Waxahachie Grove to say, this is how I feel as a resident, and then there's the other side of me, which is, this is me here as a business owner.
Right.
And it's really hard to say, okay, well, I don't want this, but because of that, but I'm being a hypocrite because of the other. So I totally get where you're coming from. First of all, we're nothing more than an advisory board to the council.
Right.
So however we vote,
It's just advisory.
it's just an advisory deal.
I just didn't want the appearance.
No, I think it's good that you brought it up. I agree.
But now that you brought that up, that's why I had made the comment initially, and I really like that Howard came up with this, and I asked that again. When did we vote to incorporate? I don't remember, but I'm just going to use this as an example. If we voted in February of 2006, there is a time in limbo there from the time we voted to the time we actually incorporated to the time we actually had a council, which was in 2007. So did you say March of 2007?
March of 2007 was the
So
first
you
vote.
almost had a year time, 12 months, give or take, of in limbo that the county said, you guys do whatever the hell you want to do. And during that time period, and I know you guys can agree with me, you had a ton of businesses just boom, 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 boom. We had insurance people, we had a saddle company, we had everybody just jump in and say, we're going to have our business here because it's a free-for-all. It's a wild, wild west. And then all of a sudden the town incorporated, and the first time on complaints was anonymous complaints, and they had a gajillion of them, and they said, okay, hold on, enough of the anonymous complaints. We have to have complaints that are dictated on who's making the complaint to reduce those complaints, which it didn't reduce them at all. But that's why I like what Howard Bourne is saying is, okay, if we're going to respect these historical legacy of businesses in Waxahachie Groves, let's set a date. I don't care what date it is, but he's saying they have been in existence for a decade. Even 5 years, I don't care. But not, we voted in March of 2006 or February of 2006. We didn't have a council till 2007. And in that 12-month period, everybody came in here, opened up businesses and said, well, now you can say because you were in there from that time period.
Okay, but let me, I agree with you to an extent, but let me just say this. I guess the time frame that I would worry about would be from the time the town voted to the time the town got running once they had the March election the next year. But what I don't know, I'd have to research, is I don't think, did the county take a pass and then not do anything?
They did not, they did nothing.
You sure?
Yes.
Well,
I called them.
that's the effect of it.
Because don't forget, once the town got running, first thing the town did was adopt the county regulations until they had their own ULDC.
But nobody
So-
enforced it. Nobody
Okay.
enforced, no, I'm sorry. The county did not enforce anything during that time period.
No, the town had to once they were incorporated.
I understand, but from the time of the elections to the time that
Right, that's what I'm saying, I agree with you.
there was
from
no
that time.
enforcement there.
But then from the time the town became a town,
Yes.
it had the county regulations to rely on until the ULDC.
I understand, but this date says October 1st of 2006. So what happened between When did the enforcement begin?
Oh, but here's the thing. We left it up to the county to enforce while we were in limbo because the legislature could have turned us down.
Right.
You can't have somebody that just loses all subject to, I mean, you still have the county sheriff and everything else.
Right.
Here's what I think may be an answer to what Becca's bringing up. What we all have kind of discussed and think is a good idea to recommend is a recognition that this pretty much qualifies historical businesses
Yes.
for the special exception.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that there can't be something that's not a historical business that would have to go through
Something else.
something else. So it's not as though this is the be-all, end-all with 10 years. It just means that that's a really big factor for the town council to consider in line with the whole history of this town. But I think what you're talking about is that, you know, the distinction between voting in March of 2006 and the...
I'm guessing that's the month, I'm sorry.
And the governor making it effective in October, I'm not sure is as critical a distinction given what we're really doing.
And I believe that's why this residential agricultural sales and service law or rule or whatever came into being, was to protect the historical people more than anything,
Then the
not
new-
the
then
people that
bringing
just
in
came in right after we became town.
Right.
Howard?
Okay, this is only anecdotal, okay? There's nowhere you can get documentation of this, but for your own edification, okay? Palm Beach County took a stance of don't bother us. Loxahatchee Groves is incorporated, they're their own town. Loxahatchee Groves wasn't equipped to handle anything, answer any questions, give any permissions. So you had Palm Beach County absolutely refusing to issue permits, and you had no permitting issuing body in the groves. And that's the free-for-all time period that Beck's referring to. Now, could you prove in writing that that time period existed once we all passed? No, but there was.
And do you know, just out of curiosity, how many uses came in that you know of or aware of?
I know of about three, for sure three, that are no longer here, that they went to them, they told them to pick them out. Yeah, one of them, I could take you to the places, I don't know the
The
address.
property on the corner of B Road and the northeast corner of B Road in Okeechobee, that showed up. Okay, that's what, Rock and something, claiming to be a nursery.
Yep.
And then I don't know what the other place is on the northwest corner of B Road in Okeechobee, that big
Yeah,
building.
Gigi's,
No, Gigi's is
on
on
the
our
east,
side.
on the west.
So what is that big building on the other side?
That they paid pretty much all of the 5 acres.
Right, that popped up.
That popped up as well. Then there was also a saddle shop off Collecting Canal. They moved. There was an insurance guy. It's the yellow house on Folsom and like Marcella or Bryan or something. And they're right there. I mean, they popped up, and when they went to them, hey, you can't do this. Oh, okay, bye. They left. Certain ones said, no, we're going to stay by here. One of them is Seth in particular. So you're right. Should I vote or not vote on this? As a resident, I totally feel very confident, though it's still kind of a little poke in my ribs, but I don't have a problem with historical businesses that were here even before I ever came to the Groves, and I've been here 13 years.
Let's see if you ever become the deciding vote.
Let's get to that.
Okay.
No, then it doesn't matter.
All right, Howard, let me ask you something now, because we keep referring to this document that Howard submitted, and I've read it. Nowhere, and have I missed it, but nowhere in here does this specific document refer to just agricultural businesses, so I want to make sure we're talking, because this document refers to, we're saying agricultural support sales and services is what we're looking at. And then we've also discussed this document, which is more than just agriculture, correct? I just want to make that distinction.
I think the town council people recognize that there was more than just a strict agricultural business that had been here.
But I'm
That
thinking
could
of
come
somebody
back.
like, and I don't know if, I'm thinking of somebody like Choquette, who's been here a long time.
That's who this was written for, too.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
The gun guy,
But,
Air vote guy.
yeah.
but he's not agricultural. So what I'm saying is, we're talking as, this is agriculture, and it seems we might want to change this. Go ahead, Katie, go ahead.
Sorry.
You were going to say.
The only concern I have, I agree with what you're saying with the word support, then we're gonna have people that are possibly selling hay and shavings, selling halters, because you need a halter and that supports your agricultural services, and they're gonna be selling fence posts, and then they're gonna be selling wire, and then they're gonna be selling,
Nails and light bulbs.
right, and I think the word support is really vague, and then it would be, you know, nurseries that are growing plants, like John, and then nurseries coming in, not Walmart, but a nursery like Walmart that ships other plants, and that ships rock, and that ships emulsion and selling it. So, and that would be an agricultural sales and support, because they're supporting.
And the thing is, the products that are allowed to be sold under this ordinance are already listed. So you can't all of a sudden
Okay, so
put
you
in light
just wanna
bulbs.
add support, but it's only for this?
Yes.
Okay.
And it is limited to this part. Now, the other thing I want to make sure I understand,
Yeah.
we're referring in the ag residential, so we are not referring, and I asked this briefly before, we are not referring to properties that are in commercial designated zones, correct? So we're not like along Okeechobee Boulevard, we're not talking down towards Southern.
Well, yes, because Okeechobee Boulevard is in the AR district.
Okay, well, I'm used to, excuse me, but Red Barn I thought was commercial. Okay, so
That's an interesting.
never mind, then I won't, well, let me just say, but I do need to understand what I'm voting
I'd like to know
on,
why it's
okay? I do need to understand, so what we are saying, if combining the concept here, this suggestion is for more than agricultural businesses, it's for old businesses, pre-existing 10 years to date, and we are saying on residential properties and ag residential zoning.
Yes.
Okay, and so we're talking about now about combining the two, is that what I'm hearing?
I'm not sure what we would do.
I don't, my objective was to replace this with
That's what I'm
mine.
trying to understand.
Because this was actually done to accommodate the Ikes.
Yes.
Okay, and as I said, we still have the Choquette to deal with, and Bill Klein's airboat, and who knows what else. I mean, please, don't take offense.
No.
My father always told me, if you're sick and you go to a surgeon, he's gonna find a way to cut you open. All right? So if you're sick and you go to a nutritionist, they're gonna change your diet, you know? The bottom, and there's everything in between. If you go to a planner and say, blah, 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 he's gonna plan, and you did exactly what you were asked to do. But I don't think any of this is necessary, nor the exposure the town has to the can of worms of, if you write it this way, then you have to let other people do it too. If you confine it to historical legacies, then you basically cut everybody out from getting in on the bandwagon.
All right, Mark?
I have a question for member board, because I haven't had a chance to look at this and analyze.
All right, so I was reading it.
But the question I would have for you is, are there, it appears what you've done is you've taken it, as the chair said, out of the agricultural realm, and you've called it a historical legacy, which is good. And you provided the criteria by which you would judge the historical legacy application or proposed use. My question is, do we have uses in the town, however, that could qualify for this, that you wouldn't want to see, because technically if they can meet these criteria, you are going to be stuck with them?
No, you're 90% of the way there, but not totally.
Well, you're,
You're getting close.
yeah.
My answer to that,
Unintended consequences.
I have
That's where I'm going.
several answers to
Yeah.
that, okay? If number one, most of anything that we would object to would fall under public health and safety, okay? Where else do we go? Morally, if somebody has been operating a full-blown bordello in Loxahatchee Groves for the last 25, 30 years, and nobody knows about it, God bless you, keep going for another 20, 30 years. I don't see them coming forward and saying, here I am, I want in on this. Again, I don't see the types of businesses that you are legitimately worried about coming forward and trying to get in on this. I see them trying to remain hidden.
Perhaps we can, let me ask this, is there something maybe we should add another line in here subject to town management? I mean, is there a way to protect us from an unintended consequence? A sentence that can be added?
Well, the town council still has.
The objection that I had to that by a couple people I ran this by is they did not feel that this document should be written in a way where the town management could exercise prejudice in one way or another.
That's fine with me too, don't.
Uh,
I like to stay away from those
Yeah.
situations too, so.
Well, can you give us an example of something that if we say yes, not anybody in particular, but just company X has something that we would say, okay, hold on, we don't want
Well,
to.
I don't want to start getting into specifics of the case, but the case that Mr. Ryan brought up yesterday would be one that I would think about.
What was it?
What was one?
Yeah.
The one that, you know, I was talking
The
about.
code enforcement, the code enforcement
The
issue.
set,
isn't it?
set
Yeah.
prior.
But see, he doesn't fit within this because he hasn't been around a decade before incorporation.
2000.
But you asked me for one, that's one that I would.
No, well, I thought what you were gonna say is that somebody that changed the oil in trucks or something and they spilled the oil on the ground.
Well,
Then
that's
again,
an
having been here now a
example.
number of
That's
months, I
a
know
very
that
good
lots of hats you
example.
can't have as member
Well,
board.
Well, they need to prove that they
Something
something
that's
for 10
hidden
years.
away and I'm not aware of it, so.
Well, let me just say this to Beck's example, he has an example, okay? I lived next to, Beck and I both lived next to a chop shop for how many years?
Plenty.
Okay? No, Palm Beach County did nothing about it, so I did the crazy white lady routine, and I was very neighborly to them, and
They were actually pretty good neighbors, kinda, when you're.
yeah, their dogs chewed up my goat, but no problem. So anyway, we've had experience with people dropping oil and everything on property, and that's a good example of something that it's agencies that would prevent them from doing that.
But I think that's covered by the, present a threat to public health or safety, and public health would be contamination of the environment. So going back to these businesses that exist, the airboat guy, I mean, if he's got containers he catches the oil in, he recycles, he's doing all this, and he's in a little shop in the middle of his property, I don't have a problem with that. It's not like he's running 20 airboats through there every day and he's got 20 employees on there.
Even if he tests the airboat engines?
He's got it, well, we have somebody who does that right next to us, and he only does it once in a while, but they have to do it within, they have to,
Well, we have noise ordinances already, right? And if they run over that noise ordinance during the day, is that breaking the noise ordinance?
right, they have to comply with the regulations.
Is that, can you break the noise ordinance between 8 and 8? I don't know what the times are.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how.
Yeah, that's a touchy one around here
So,
now,
well,
too.
that's what I'm saying, but I mean, if you're running a jackhammer and it's louder than 60 decibels, but you're cracking concrete at noon, I think you should be able to do that.
Well, here's the sentence, Mark, I asked you if we could add something to it, and again, I'm not remembering everything's in here, but can we just add the sentence, must comply,
Yes.
must comply with
With what?
ordinances?
Whatever ordinances we got.
Well, no, you can't do that because you're gonna have ordinances that say you can't do.
Yeah, because there's gonna be businesses.
Well, must
that-
comply with
Noise.
basic, noise ordinance, you can put something simple, must comply with noise ordinance, must, you can put something selective in there that's not restrictive.
Respectfully, there's nothing in here that says they're exempt from that.
Right. That is true. That is true.
Well, let me ask one question. Are you all comfortable with items 1, 3, and 4?
Can you read this?
Has filed with the town and town office a sworn affidavit under penalty of perjury that the operation has been in existence 10 years. So are you going to rely on his word that he's been operating
No,
10
they
years?
have to provide,
So we have to show his, business tax license from the county that he's
No.
been in business for 10 years?
Well,
Well,
it
if
doesn't
he's
say
been in
that.
business for 10
It
years,
It doesn't say that here.
well, why doesn't he have it? If
This
he's
is
been
just
in
an
business, so he's
affidavit
had an
where
illegal
I
business
say
for
I've
10
been
years.
operating for 10 years.
So
It
he's
means
had
they've
an
been
illegal
operating for
business for 10
17
years,
years.
then,
Yeah.
But you say that,
well, they
on
should have
7,
gotten their,
you said he's submitting to the town official affirming the accuracy of the affidavit.
well, you can submit tax returns if you've been operating
Well,
a business.
well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, you want to have something more specific in there, or do you just want to have him sign a document saying I've been here for 10 years?
No, I think you need to,
so he's been here for 10 years.
Provide some sort of proof, and it could be
financial
some,
documentation.
either financial or witness.
That can be supported with
Or-
documentation.
Or 10 years of business tax receipts, I mean, that kind of thing. Something that documents it. Or do you want to rely on his word? That's all I'm asking. I'm not saying.
We need some sort of,
Well, just like the fellow that wanted the gun permit, because he'd always done it, he brought in his books.
All right, so just adding something that can be, supported with documentation.
Yeah, and number three, present a threat to public health or safety, that's kind of a broad one too. Maybe get some sort of.
environmental or something.
Yeah, or environmental. We don't want a manure storage operation that's been here for 20 years.
Yeah, right. So then when he comes to town, the town then will look at what he does and identify what could be a potential issue, and then have him check it out with the health department or environment.
Yes.
I don't know if we need.
If necessary.
Does not present a
Yes.
threat or violate current health code, or
Yeah.
have you something like,
Or environmental regulations.
I think we have to have something in place to make that determination if it appears like it could be. So I think we need
So need
a
wording?
little work on number three. And then number four, are we talking about, if someone called up Mark and complained about the guy next door, would that be
Yeah, it's almost a
a
veto.
basis to deny his special exception, or do we have to have some more detail there?
Well, it's like no history of complaints.
Yeah, Howard was saying this is a way to get the town council to understand this is a pretty clean operation.
I think historic pattern.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you
No,
go.
I-
yeah,
Go
you
with
can
that.
have a complaint, I mean, heck,
Yeah,
about
no.
your neighbor, but
And
it's
I agree
not
that this is a
historic.
good way to go.
Right.
We just might need to have a few more details in some of the items, that's all.
We gotta tweak it, but it's a good.
Yeah, it has
working
no
document.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, it's like Howard said, this is his rough draft, this is
Right.
an idea.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's a great idea, and you guys know how to put the wording in there to make it.
And I did say, by the way, in number one, can prove, and I ran it by Tom Goldsonet, and he said, no, they should just be able to file an affidavit, sworn testimony on perjury. I said, okay, fine, I'll change that.
Yeah.
You can tell Tom we vetoed him, okay? Nice try, tell Tom nice try.
But originally, it did say can prove,
Yeah. I mean, that's not, just something.
And you don't need, yeah, and you don't need tax receipts. You could, for that matter, Choquette could just show a picture of Google Earth archives.
Right.
Boom.
Well, and that's why you use the word documentation. You're not saying specifically it's financial, it can be document, whatever they can bring in for documentation.
Yeah, I think we should give them like a list of things that they can provide, but if we can. but-
Now, just one note, this will require probably going back and redoing everything. Now, the title change, it is quite a change from the current ordinance. So we will have to report
Yeah.
that if we decide to go with this. If-
Well, and that's my question, that's where I'm getting back to that question. We're looking at, did you want to go through any more of these items?
No, not unless there's any questions.
No, I'm talking about on this one.
Okay, well, just one suggestion. I mean, now what we could propose
Incorporating this?
the final version of this as a replacement for the section that's on page 66. That 75-35.
66?
Now, you could write a new section 70.
Yes.
-35.
Yes.
Are you suggesting then, that, so that the hay ordinance just,
Wait, are you just saying keep the hay ordinance and
No.
add this, or that's what I'm asking?
Well, I think we have to take it back to the council, since
Right.
it's already gone through.
The first reading, but-
And then give them the option to say, forget it, or.
well, we have to take it back, let me say, we have to take it back, but we're going to be taking it back from the standpoint of also providing your comment and then us making a final recommendation and indicating your recommendation.
Because we're saying eliminate, I just want to make sure, because we keep going back and forth. If we go with this hay, they've been through the first reading, so we're saying in the hay ordinance, what language do you, we're talking about incorporating in two places. What language would you like to eliminate from this document? Be specific.
I'll make the whole thing
The whole
and
thing.
replace it with this.
All right, $7,000 down the drain.
But you see, that's a government trap. Once you spend so much money on
I'm
something,
being
you try to
sarcastic,
justify
I'm
it.
very happy with this. Go ahead.
By the way, we haven't got there yet, but we're getting close if we keep playing football.
As we're playing this game here with us that are our residents from here, and we can discuss it a little different than we have in the past. When we listen to the attorney saying that a bunch of the stuff in the ULDC can pretty much
Go ahead.
go away, we have changed something that's 5 or 6 pages of a bunch of very complicated mumbo jumbo into one sheet, maybe 2 sheets of paper. And I think that's what we need to do here. In a town that we don't call a city, we call a town. We want to be government light. Let's make it light.
Okay,
It
what
shouldn't be
about-
so
Well,
complicated.
let me
What
just-
about the hours concept in here? Do you want to keep the hours concept that's in this document?
I think there's already rules that talk about not having stuff going on at midnight.
But let me say this, we're gonna have to add more to this. This is a very good start, but you're gonna have to add
Right.
definition of historical legacy,
Right.
just like we did here. We're going to have to put this in.
Mark,
as a
I
special
understand, but we have a lot of other businesses that we're gonna end up discussing later, like, Choquette or, that with this, we can cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
All I do
With
is
this,
I
we
just don't want
can
you to have
cover
the
a
illusion, this is it.
big ball of stuff
It's
and
gonna
wipe
be
all
put
that
in.
out.
That's-
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to clarify here that we understand. So Mark, could you summarize what they've been saying and put it, we're at first reading on this document before the town council. We are advising.
Second reading.
Well, we're up for second reading, we've been through the first reading. So now at this point, we are advising changing the majority of this document.
But hold up, scratching
For a
this,
recommendation, just delete.
deleting the whole thing.
So I guess to summarize what you're asking is, my recommendation would be if you are,
Trying to get this passed before the town council, so do we need to leave anything in to keep them happy is what I'm being the realist here.
oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, they went through all this and they made me say, can we keep a portion of it, instead of, we're advising throw out everything. We've got this great document here that will need to be refined. Is there anything in here worth keeping,
Yeah,
is
the
my
numbers.
question.
I want to throw one thing real quick. I want to throw one thing real quick for Mark too, because I know exactly where you're coming from. Nowhere in here does it say that somebody can't go to the town council and say, I want to start this business, can I get zoning for that? All we're saying is, if you are existing, and I think that's what this, the residential agriculture sales thing was really to cover the existing hay business. This just covers that. If you want to start a new business, there's already stuff in there that says, can I start a new business and what are the steps I need to take?
To answer your question, here's what I think, and you jump in, you have a contrary opinion. I think that with some tweaking and some minor additions, this can probably work. I think as it relates directly to your question, I think it can probably cover the concerns that the council had articulated, the mom and pop and some of those things that we were trying to address via this ordinance. We'd have to take it back. I think it would probably have to go back, we'll talk to Mike, it'll probably have to go back to P and Z, maybe not though. But it's enough of a change, it affects the title and the content is quite different from this. So I think Jim and I are both in agreement this is workable with some tweaking from us. So the question would be, I guess I would turn it back to you and say, probably to take a voice vote on if you want to direct us to take this back to council, to do the minor tweaking and additions that we need, and we'll take that recommendation back to council, and, hopefully I don't know if we'll be ready to be totally.
Right, because I'd like
We
to.
won't be able to do a second reading of council, we'd have to take it back, so
Right.
we're kind of like putting this one before them and saying, now, before you take any further action,
Right.
here's what the committee came up with, we don't have a problem with it, what do you think? You tell us where you want to go.
Yeah, because we're not trying, and again, I know that some people might get upset and say, we put all this work and time in this, let's keep something here. What we're simply saying is what Beck and John and Howard said, let's simplify what's in here. This was a great product, we simplified it down to this. It's the same concept, it keeps, the new businesses can come to the town directly, they're not prevented, but this encompasses more.
Yeah, I think council would have to reconcile, do they want to do more than the hay sales, residential hay sales? If they do and don't have a problem with that, I think they'll love this. If they, for some reason, don't want to make it that broadly, then maybe they'll have some reservations. That's the best practice.
Yeah, the one thing that I saw in here that I would like to see is that if they're gonna have a couple of trailers, that they would be screened.
Dangerous, that word,
Yeah.
okay? I really don't like that word. What you mean
Which one,
is
trailer?
screen.
Yeah, I don't like
Screen, okay? Virginia was just speaking a little bit while back as if you wanted to build a screen house over it. That's not what the intent is. The intent is shielded from view from neighboring properties. And I've always complained about the use of the word screening because people think something particular that's not intended when the word is used.
Exactly.
In other words, you don't want them to be conspicuous.
Shielded.
Well,
Shielded
shielded
from
from
view.
Okay, that's even more.
You know, hide yourself.
We want everybody to buy trees to put around.
We know a lot of nurseries.
Yeah.
You know,
And it has to come from local nurseries.
Right, they must buy local.
It has to, that's gotta be the law.
I mean, you can hang an
Oh.
Iraqi camo thing over it for that matter.
Just don't use Florida Hollow.
Hey, would you like to make a motion? Hold on a second. Who would like to make a motion?
I make a motion that we,
Well, I don't know if you can, it might be a little, yeah, let's not, John's gonna think about it a little bit here.
All right. Oh,
Let's
I'll
talk,
make
they're talking so we can talk too, so.
I'll make a motion that we combine the intent of, what was it, page 68?
60 to 66, I think.
We combine the intent of section 75035 with the concept of businesses classified as historical legacies, that this become a form of special exception that would go to the town council with the presumption of having satisfied the major requirements if they satisfy the ones that are listed in this attachment.
Hold on, I think he's still making a motion.
Well, wait a minute.
I think kind of mixing it all together.
This just goes out.
Yeah, this just goes
So
back.
do we make a
When I
motion?
said combine, I was talking about combining it with, you know, this outline with what was originally established as section 75035.
Well, wouldn't we get rid of that?
No, this becomes part of section 75035.
Yes,
except
the
for the
lead.
implementation. I mean, it basically just says, this is the way that we're dealing with historical legacy businesses.
I think if you wanted to maintain the flexibility in your motion, just indicate that you're recommending that staff have the ability to take the concept and work between the two, but this being the intent, obviously.
All right, I'll modify my motion to reflect that direction to staff.
I second it.
Okay, anyone opposed?
And do we vote?
Aye.
No,
Aye.
you can't vote.
Oh,
I don't
I'm
vote.
sorry.
We can do the roll call if you'd like.
No, I just thought, what do you need me to say here? I thought I said.
Motion approved?
Motion approved. I mean, I just thought they were waiting for a vote again or something. Motion approved.
Yes.
All right, at this point, Madam Chair, let me offer, you guys understand, I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, that is, I think what has to happen, because this was up for second reading, and it was continued. I think what might have to happen, just my non-legal opinion, is that they may have to bring it up for second reading and vote it down.
How about table it? Table the second reading until they decide on what the final product of this is.
Exactly.
Can staff ask
It's
for
really
them?
going to depend on, if they fall in love with this
Yeah.
example, they're probably going to tell us, okay, go with that, but there is enough change and enough difference in it that it will affect the title and will affect the body, that we probably have to go back and, what I don't know is if we have to go as far back as the P and Z or whether we just go back to council with it. I do have to check with Mike on that and see what his legal interpretation is on that.
But couldn't we do what Howard and I have just been talking about tabling the second reading until this
So
alternative
this
is
can take this next.
Well, it's possible, but I mean, if they table it, that means they're holding in the veins because they're not so sure they like this, then they want to see what happens. That's the way I interpret it. If
Yeah,
they table it.
I don't know how inclined they are to pull the trigger on things, you know that. You sit there Okay, so if you allow them to table it rather than make the decision to throw it out, then you allow an immediate decision where they're not gonna have buyer's remorse after the fact.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not gonna surprise anybody.
Yeah, I just brought that up so that, just in case any of you were there, and it did come up for a vote, that
You can speak to it.
you could understand that might be what they're doing, is just voting it down and getting rid of it right now.
See, probably the way I'll try to structure the agenda with that is, that's on as an ordinance at second reading. And what I'll probably do is, before we do that, I'm gonna wanna give the report of your deliberation of the matter at that committee. So they know where you're coming from, where staff is coming from, and then, so they're not even getting to the ordinance that's on the table. They're kind of talking about this and about what you guys have recommended first. And I think that'll work smoothly, then they can transition to whatever action they want to take.
But I'd give them enough meat that they understood what the alternative was, because it is a pretty serious thing to tackle a second reading.
Okay, so we have finished with item,
What I was going to say, Madam Chair, is by your own rules that you made at your first meeting.
I'd like to take a recess.
Well, you did say that you were gonna hold your meetings for a period of 2 hours, and then you were gonna decide if you wanted to continue forward. So in attempting to help you with that determination, my suggestion is what we can do, I'll talk about definitions a little bit, and then what I can do is swing down to the ethics information. And it just depends on how long you folks want to stay here tonight. We could get back into the special exceptions and non-conformities, but I would think that, we can probably hold those off to the next meeting. It just depends on how
Whatever
long we
everyone
want
wants
to
to
stay.
do. John?
Yeah, I'd like to hold it off for this reason. When I looked at the background materials on ethics, those were developed before the county had adopted public officials' ethics. We had the Ethics Commission, and we had the Inspector General reviewing everything that goes on in the towns and public officials. And my thinking is that we ought to consider, as a town, really looking at the structure of ethics commission, and inspector general, and consider whether we should adopt that as opposed to our version of an ethics ordinance, because then we'll be subject, if we don't, we'll be subject to both, and there are differences, and I don't think that's
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
logical.
We can have our own punishment, like sergeant feathers.
Stop.
Okay,
And it
so
stops.
we'll go through definitions.
Right, now, I don't know, do you want to take a break?
I want to take like a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll do definitions. Yes, let's.
I figure if we do that, well, that's probably another 20, 25 minutes, and then if you want, that we can,
Okay,
we can do this for the next meeting,
okay.
plus whatever else we add on.
Maybe in the next agenda, you could give us some background information on the county structure.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to continue the meeting after a short recess, and just to recap, we did have a unanimous decision on a motion for amending the hay sales. Okay, we're continuing with item 3, definitions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we indicated in our last meeting, we wanted to add there was a lot of discussion on certain definitions. We wanted to bring that as a part of your next meeting so you can see them. The definition section, which is Article 10, is composed of 3 parts: construction of terms, abbreviations, and then the definitions. As you can see here, it's 20 pages. A lot of definitions there. One of the things that I'm going to recommend to you is that prior to our next meeting, if you have any definitions you specifically want us to address or cover or explain, to send me an email, and I will address them at our next meeting. By the way, I didn't get any emails from anybody, member of the public or anything, so that's why during our portion of the meeting, I didn't report anything. But, as I said earlier, definitions are not, you don't regulate through definitions. Although I say that, sometimes it looks like you are, based upon the way the definition is written, and planners and folks that are lawyers that are drafting these sometimes fall into the trap and end up getting too regulatory within the scope of the definition. But it's basically there just to give you an idea that as you see terms in the code, that you understand what the code is talking about and how it's applied. Ideally, when you're drafting a zoning ordinance or a unified land development code, you don't do definitions first. However, some professionals make that mistake. What you do is you should wait till you've written all your other sections, and then you go back and determine, okay, what terms are there that should be defined further, so the reader has an idea of where we're going with intent. Having said that, there are a number of definitions that are customary and traditional to zoning and unified land development codes that should be found in every one, like good examples would be setback, yard, principal use, accessory use. Those kinds of definitions always have to be in the code, so you have an idea. And it's just a question of how you might, and the language is pretty much the same for the most part, maybe 90% the same. There's just little nuances in what the definition may say. So what I'm proposing is at our next meeting, if you guys could all get me your questions or those definitions that either trouble you or that you want a clarification on, we'll have those, so we'll be ready to address those. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll also at our next meeting, we're going to go over what we see as some of the troublesome definitions. And obviously, like I said, we'd like to be at a point where we can identify those definitions that we think are either problematic or could be better or could be removed. At the next meeting, that's what we want to do. So with that, I'll address any questions.
Is there any way you could email us all a list of those things so we could put some thought into it between now and next month when we have a meeting?
You mean what I just said verbally?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Sure. I'll send you all an email.
A list of the definitions that you feel need to be worked on. You don't have to...
The troublesome.
Right. Because then we can come in here and boom, 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 rather than just hearing it for the first time.
It might not be exhaustive because I want to get it to you, but I'll be able to give you a start.
Exactly.
And then that's what I'm asking for before in return from you guys. Doesn't mean you have to give me every one that you think's a problem, but just so we can start to work on it.
And can I...
There's 20 pages here, there's a lot of stuff in there.
Right, well, can I suggest... Okay, they're in alphabetical order.
Yes, they are.
Like Lester.
It'd be nice if you had a number so you could say definition number 27, 86, 42, but whatever.
Well, that's a good comment, and that may be another recommendation that the structure and numbering of the ULDC may need to be reviewed and looked at. And this is a good section that actually would give credence to that.
Well, you know what the difficulty is? The difficulty with that, if you put it as a permanent part of the ULDC, and I know because I've written books, and you do an index, and then all of a sudden you find something else, now you got to go back and renumber every single thing in that index.
Yeah.
So as soon as you find another definition to put in under H, you got to
That's why you use the accounting method and you use 100, you 100, 200, 300, 400. Okay.
Okay.
So basically, we just need to read this, look for your input on problem definitions, give you feedback when we come back.
I know. I was looking at it.
Another key too is, and we are going to be talking about this, but, again, I'm sure the ULDC will not stay in the current format it's in, but there may be some things that aren't there that we need to make sure we have in the future. You may feel the same way about some of those.
Well, let me ask you this, the supplement, and I asked Susan this before we started the meeting, the ULDC book we have is current through 2010. To get the current edition, additional ULDCs, we go online to the website, the town website.
Well, not really. We have to work that out with Unified Land Code, I'm sorry.
I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about unicode.com. I'm just wondering if it's best just to go through our agendas or to get an idea, because even those were a little confusing at
I'm
times.
trying to think back. We have not had many amendments that would have affected the ULDC.
No.
Okay. I just remember.
I'll double check that and you remember
Yeah,
something?
you could, several months ago, there was a town council meeting where there's some ULDCs put in, but they were out of order. This was about 6 months ago, in November, December.
Do you
I'll go
remember what
back,
the subject matter was?
I'll bring back the agenda. I'll go through and look, and then I'll
Okay.
bring that up at the next
Because
meeting.
we've actually been quite fortunate, if that's the proper word, that we haven't had a lot of, we really have to get on getting the Unicode to do our entire code of ordinances that need to be codified. And then this effort's gonna really be helpful in terms of kind of trying to hopefully doing it in one fell swoop,
Alright.
you know?
So this book, we're pretty current then. You'll let us know
Yeah.
next meeting if there's
Yes.
any other ones we should be aware of, any supplements.
This was probably the first big amendment that you talked about tonight, the hay sales.
The hay sales
Yeah.
room, okay.
Mhm.
I thought there might have been another one. And you
Yeah,
mentioned,
the manure ordinance, Jim just mentioned that the manure ordinance is a standalone ordinance, even though we treat it as a land development type ordinance, but it was never moved into the.
right, that never made it to the LDC. And you also mentioned something at the beginning about a white paper. Could you elaborate on that?
Oh, relative to agriculture.
Right, that you said that'd be something in the
Yeah,
future.
we had a conference call a couple weeks back with Mike and Jim and myself and our code enforcement vendors, and just trying to look at what the AGO did, and of course, Howard's correspondence to me also, brought on some thought from all of us. I know he's listening, he's not.
He's acting like he's ignoring you.
I know.
No, I'm listening to
And,
every I'm reading the
I have
definition of
pulled a number of the
agriculture.
statutes. I mean, I've been dealing with a lot of these statutes going back even before the start of this decade. And so, the thing is, you have to look at them all and try to put them in some kind of order. We felt that it would be in the town's best interest for present and future staff and officials and board members to know what the town's official position is as it relates to ag. And when I say official position, I mean identifying all the statutes, how they affect each other, how it affects land use, so that everybody can, have the guidelines.
Coexist.
Doesn't mean everything's gonna fit nicely into that, but at least it gives us a working document so somebody's not from the town that someday making an opinion that's like way out there. They just don't get it or understand what's going on. That kind of thing.
I think it's extremely, not only important, but urgent, because I already see a shift in mindset from what the intentions supposedly were after incorporation. And, a perfect example, well, I won't pull out an example, but, a lot of people are 100% for agriculture everywhere, whenever possible, until all of a sudden their next door neighbor moves away and it's, oh my God, what's going to move next door to me? And then all of a sudden they're not so happy with any type of agriculture being allowed anywhere. And so you have a shift in minds, and we all know that to this day arguments take place in the Supreme Court as to what the founders meant when they wrote the Constitution, okay? I suggested at the outset an agricultural Bill of Rights be written into the town, what is it? It's drew the blank. The town charter, okay? And then all of a sudden, everybody that had no idea what that means started chiming in and said, well, yeah, I have a right to keep my neighbor from growing plants that I'm allergic to. And I said, no, that's a Bill of Wrongs. It's not a Bill of Rights. and it just went way out in left field, and it got dropped. So I think a white paper as to where the town stands and the directions the incorporators and the citizens want would be marvelous.
And just so you know, one of the things that I've been thinking about is, we have a roadways, equestrian trails, and greenways committee. And one of the things that I've been toying with is possibly trying to add agriculture to their function. Almost just where there's like a board or a committee that could actually talk about these issues as something comes up. Now, I'm still playing with that in terms of how that would work, so that it wouldn't be, what I don't want to do is, create a board where they're not really sure what they're dealing with in agriculture. I mean,
They've got a full plate.
well, they do and they don't. I've kind of told them very frankly at their last meeting, they kind of settled mostly on dealing with equestrian trails. And I said, no, roadway and greenway is also in your, and you got to be more than just a trail board.
Mark, do you want an agricultural committee, Mark? Is that what you want? Sounds like Mark wants another committee.
That's
If I want another committee, I'm going to get rid of one.
That is
We
already
need a fair.
stirred the whole pot.
After we leave, are you gonna have the next committee lined up? Is that what you're saying? You're gonna do the white paper and then have the agricultural committee?
Hold on,
I
let's
mean-
finish this meeting though.
Yeah.
That's already stirred a whole pot. We've been on the phone about that left and right, you know. Bill Lauda says to me, yeah, they added agriculture to our responsibilities. I said, what do they want you to do with agriculture? I got no idea. They just Mark put it at the end of our name. I went,
We'll
you
just
got
jump the gun a little bit there.
You know, and these people were chosen because it was believed by the councilmen that appointed them that they would be beneficial to the specific title of the group they worked with. I would guess that if they were forming an agricultural committee, which to me would have a lot less to do now that we have this AGO opinion, it might be made up of a whole completely different group of people.
Oh, that's quite possible. And I mean, their reaction to it was, you know,
Sure.
they went, let's go, but they weren't, no way.
Well, you didn't give any explanation.
That's right.
I asked him, well, what did he
It was
say
kind of
about it?
broad.
Nothing. I said, you mean he added agriculture and nobody even asked him, well, what are we going to do with it? No.
I don't have that magic wand.
Okay, are we at a point then that we should discuss the next meeting time?
You want to do the ethics real quickly?
Oh, I apologize. Oh, yes, let's
Okay.
get on the ethics.
Okay. Well, thank you. We provided a lot of information for you there. The key thing is, Palm Beach County Commission on Ethics, they are really, they're a strong group, and they are pushing forward their initiatives. And I can tell you, we got a memo that they indicated we had 42 staff personnel, which really got me concerned, because I think what they're doing is they're counting everybody from board members to our consultants as staff members. And Sue did an outstanding job in terms of trying to coordinate this with them. I think all of us in the management company have done the video, so we're in good shape there. There are still a few folks that need to, get that done. But as Mike kind of indicated to you, it's not a big deal. It's a video, it lasts about an hour. It did have, what's his name, Alan, what was his name?
I can't remember. He's
Alan.
not,
Alan Johnson. Alan Johnson was the director.
but he's not.
He just recently left. But he kind of goes through an hour lecture and gets into all kinds of scenarios related to ethics. And then the other thing so I recommend you get that all done so nobody is trying to say, you're not complying with that. And then Member Ryan brought up the other issue. We also added, for your information, the Town of Waxahachie Grove's ethics ordinance, which is 2009-01, because as board members, you are also subject to the dictates in that ordinance. And I think his suggestion is a good one, that at some point, maybe very near future, we look at that ordinance in conjunction with both the Palm Beach County Commission of Ethics requirements and also the Inspector General, Inspector General ordinance.
Already outlined.
I mean, right now, we are required to keep a registry of lobbyists that come into our doors.
Do we have it?
We haven't had it yet, luckily, but I mean, if, I guess, it is broad enough, probably anybody putting an application in could, under that ordinance, the way I view it, could be construed to be a lobbyist.
The ordinance is just amateurish.
Yeah. So, I mean, when somebody's coming in and they're filing an application for a land use amendment or whatever, well, they're the applicant. It's expected they're going to try to lobby for their position, but it's not like they're a high-priced lobbyist out of Tallahassee coming down and trying to, and our code prohibits that from happening anyway. Once, just so you know, I don't know if you're all aware, but once somebody files an application in town, they can't talk to the council members. They get a chance right at the beginning, before it's filed, to make comments and tell them what they envision doing, and then that's it. There's a cone of silence. And they really have to work through me to be able just to be able to try to find out any information, or as the process is moving forward from an administrative standpoint. So, and again, the same thing with the board members. You can't be talking to them either. So if they, P&Z members have to be very careful.
You can't even have a workshop or comments at public meetings.
Yeah, it's very
Theoretically.
Yeah,
It's just not worded right.
I'm sure when you've had time to go through it, you'll see it. And if you wanted to talk about it further, I don't know if we really need to spend time with this board and all the duties you have and all the workload you're going to have to get into it. But I do believe Member Ryan's comments are well taken. It's probably something we're going to have to do. It's probably time to look at that ordinance and
Maybe if you compile the county's code and the ethics commission, how the background works, and then the OIG, just as a reference.
I gotta tell you,
We're subject to all of that.
I was telling you how bullish they are. Apparently, I received a call from them a couple weeks ago that we have not passed in the town an ethics training policy. Now, I wasn't aware that we needed to do such a thing. And the representative from the ethics commission said, well, I'm just letting you know, you better have it in 45 days or guess who gets blamed? The town manager. It's like, oh, what a lovely bedside manner that is, you know? So I guess I have to come up with training policy really quickly. And, you
Well,
know.
can't the training
Watch
policy
the
just go
video.
online and take this course?
Well, they provide, well, here's a good thing, they did provide us with an example, which I'm sure they would like me to adopt, lock, stock, and barrel, so, I mean, you know.
Okay.
So we'll look at it.
I mean, they've already got the whole structure, you gotta just adopt it, because we're subject to it anyway.
Yeah. And we've taken the Office of Inspector General very seriously, especially as it relates to our procurement. So, I mean, you know, management company believes in total compliance with that. We're ethical
support it.
folks, and, you know, so we're not gonna, but they're a little heavy-handed, they are. I say that to the camera.
Turn your face around.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, so with that, the next meeting, you want to talk about?
yes, would you like to discuss the next meeting date and time?
Could we set Thursdays?
Third Thursday, so
It's 5 o'clock.
Can we do 5:30?
that's easier for the members, sure.
Sure. Whatever's good for you.
Howard Blair, is that me?
No, I already said yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
According to my calendar, that would be March 21st again, same. February, March
So we're going with March 21st at 5:30.
5:30. And it'll be here unless we have a problem with the room, but we should be okay.
Any comments before we leave? John?
I think we covered some useful information, and hopefully we'll give some useful recommendations as a result of tonight's meeting.
Beth?
I think we did good.
Howard?
I think we accomplished a lot. I'd like to see, since I'd always like to accomplish something specific at every meeting, I see no reason why the next meeting shouldn't have something ready for us to kind of vote on in relation to John's proposal to replace all this business with what we're already, as far as ethics is concerned. So we can just put that through, and at least we have that on the table if we disagree on absolutely everything else for the entire evening.
Well, we'll be discussing the special exception uses and the non-conforming uses at the next meeting, so we've moved that to the next meeting. So we'll
Just a
have
note, a reminder, Jim had made some changes to that from the first one you got, so you might want to look at that.
Okay,
a
so
little
this
carefully.
agenda is the one that we ignore the first agenda?
Yeah, I would
and
As
stick
far
to
as
the
the
second?
special exception goes, yes.
Okay, so
See what's in this.
for the old business, this is,
No, that would be pages, let's see, starting on page 41, yeah, 41.
okay.
41 through, goes to 59.
Yeah, it's a little, I made some changes to the text, and I reduced the amount of introductory stuff.
Kind.
Yeah.
Okay, 41 to 59, we need to look at this agenda.
41, 42 and 90 is actually where it begins, right?
Yes.
Katie, closing comments?
I think we're definitely heading in the right direction. I think we covered a lot of good stuff. I just think we're definitely heading in the right direction.
I hope the town council gives a serious ear to what we're recommending. We don't recommend it lightly. Everyone's very serious and committed to what they're doing here. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Yay. Hey, Jim, are we done?
And meeting adjourned.
This off the
Here,
record.
here.
No, she
Is
hasn't
that
got
all
the
we
camera
got?
on.
You need to hear the gavel.
Yeah, turn that off. would you? What did you say is complicated on the red one? Now I'm like worried.